Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules live stream. We are doing an emergency show right now because of the recent leaks from the young Republicans and what exactly this means for the future of the Republican Party, whether there's going to be a schism now between the young or not so young, in the case of that 30-year-old guy, Groyper faction, versus people who are, I guess you could say, more of the old school. And as we've seen, J.D. Vance was defending the Groyper faction. And I want to hear from these two guests. We have returning the champion, Counterpoints Connor, all the way from Florida, former military, former police officer, great dad, and leans more on the, I'd say, classically liberal side. And we have a newcomer to the show, Bumbadum, if I'm saying that correctly, who is a complete wild card. I have no idea what to expect from Bumbadum over here, but you are more on the reactionary end, as people could probably tell by your avatar, as well as the OPSEC. So without further ado, I would love to start this off with Connor. Give your impressions on what exactly is going on here. And once again, everybody, don't forget to smash that subscribe button, smash that like button, sneed all the super chats. Your help is extremely important for the growth of the show. And all the people who are watching this on Connor's channel, if you want to help BTR grow, get in here, breaktherules.tv, subscribe right now. You're going to see videos with Curtis Yarvin and a lot of other really awesome things that Connor was in. So anyway, Connor, take it away, my friend.
Yeah, so just to do a little bit, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for your kindness. Doing my intro. I'm a science fiction, politics, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran. I would argue a classical Republican, meaning that I probably have the Republican values of, I don't know, Romney, Bush, the neocons, Nikki Haley, Chris Christie, whenever he talks. And I feel pretty alienated from the party right now. So I've been never Trump since 2015. I had a recent conversation that I think has illuminated me that we are dealing with several massive problems that are fueling the radicalism on both sides. I would say it's wealth inequality, rapid demographic change, meaning the baby bust along with mass immigration, existential technological shifts like AI and the internet, and the dissolution of the social fabric, where our demographic change has been so crazy so fast that a lot of people feel alienated from their own societies. I would say the problem with the reactionary right is that their solutions in some regards are worse than the disease. And so, Nick Fuentes, as an example, talking about the Groyper reactionary right, in my opinion, based off of a lot of the content that I've consumed, he's a race realist. He's like a voluntary segregationist. He's a Christian theocrat. He wants effectively like a Christian theocracy. I think these are the desperate gasps of a traditionalism that is brittle, that will probably not survive the next 50 to 100 years. The problem with that, of course, is that it's popular. Probably 1/6 of the country believes in either Groyper-like Christian nationalist beliefs. And they're also a dominant voice in the Republican Party. If you actually look at polling, they're about 55 to 60% of the Republican Party. They choose Donald Trump as a matter of first choice. So that's kind of the problem with the Republicans is we're dealing with these existential problems. The prescriptions suck. The leadership sucks. And I think the cure is worse than the disease. But then, of course, we disagree on that. So I think that's a decent place to start.
But not only that, what do you think about this current situation with these particular individuals being doxxed and kicked out and all of that?
Well, I mean, I think they're representative of like the real frustration and anger of young men in the United States of America. I'm not going to freak out if somebody's using the N-word with an A. I'm not going to freak out about racist jokes. I'm not going to freak out about, making jokes about Hitler. I think the problem isn't making jokes. I think the problem is being serious about it. I think that's the problem. When I made jokes in 2000s, when I made jokes in the 2010s, when I make joke in the 2020s, I might say some racist shit. But typically my audience or my target or my friend, they understand that I'm bantering. I'm making fun of them in order to push in the same direction as them. I don't actually think that they're like subhuman pieces of shit. Whereas I think part of the problem with the jokes in, the dissident right is that they're not really jokes. They're underlying a real hostility to people from different ethno-religious racial backgrounds. And it's also underlying a real sweeping for authoritarianism as a necessary governmental action in order to preserve what they want to preserve. So that's my frustration with it, is it's not jokes.
So you would say that the things that were leaked, you would put all of them into that category of things that
I wouldn't say all. I would probably put it at a 70-30, 80-20. I would say 70-30 of it is jokes. Like, I don't think the guy actually wants to put his political opponents who don't vote for him in an actual Zyklon B gas chamber. But at the same time, is the sentiment effectively you're either with us or against us? I think that's the joke is a joke, because I don't think he would put his opponents in a gas chamber. The underlying thrust of the joke is you're either with us or against us.
So this brings us to Bumbadum.
Bumbadum. You can say
Bumbadum. Bumbadum. There we go. So what are your thoughts on what Connor was just saying right now?
I'm actually kind of impressed. Most of the time when I see the kind of classical liberal or classical right or whatever, they won't even give enough credit as to the problems that create the extremism. So I'm impressed that you even kind of were able to enumerate that. That makes me happy for the future of this conversation. And generally for like the prescriptions, I would agree. I think that everything that you essentially are representing here in this conversation is an example of those prescriptions failing. Like everything, like the people you named, like Romney, Bush, Nikki Haley, let's say go all the way back to Reagan. These people have all just been abject failures and are the reason why we are where we are today. As for the messages, if we want to kind of stay more focused on the actual content of the messages, there's one other thing. The categorizing these people as groypers, I want to introduce a little bit of nuance here. These guys are not groypers. Groypers are a very specific fan base of one guy, and these people are not only like they have changed over time. So when you go back, I'll give you some lore. When you go back to like 2019, we go back to 2019, 2020, Nick Fuentes had this groyper war movement where college kids went around to TPUSA events, and the goal was to push the Overton window. The goal is to push the Overton window to essentially where we are now, which is mass immigration constriction. And
wait! Before you keep going, you just want to make sure counterpoints. If you're typing things in, please mute yourself.
Okay.
Keep going, Buddha Boom.
So when we go back to 2019, and you can go and you can find all these videos, they were pretty tame. They were pretty tame. It was pretty much everything that was being said, Charlie Kirk essentially was agreeing with up until the moment that he was assassinated. And that was what groypers were back then. And then after 2020, something happened. I don't know. There's all sorts of interesting theories. And the movement in itself split apart. And you had a lot of these people that essentially what MAGA is right now, and the ostensible positions that everybody agrees with in the Republican Party, the most highest margin approval ratings that Trump has are essentially on these anti-Israel, or not anti-Israel, isolationist, anti-war. That's a better way of saying it. Isolationist, anti-war, and anti-immigration. And these were like the two main things that they were pushing. That was like 2020. And then things got crazy, and now you have this very weird movement. Nobody knows, though, how to properly categorize the accelerationism on the right and the left. So then we get very, very messy words like calling 30-year-old young Republicans that have no association with Nick Fuentes groypers. They're not. What they are is they were edgy. They were edgy like I was edgy when I played World of Warcraft in college. They were edgy like everybody, like every over video game socialized young male, which is a lot of them, the way that they're all edgy. They're just like that. And when we look at the way that these group chats were acquired, it's very obvious that this is not a manner of like this is not the biggest comparison that people are making is to Jay Jones, right? And Jay Jones, where he was saying that he wants to see the children of Republican legislatures murdered to force them to change their political positions. That was leaked by the person that he sent it to. And it was leaked because they were so disgusted. I think it was like a Republican legislature that actually sent the messages. These leaks have now all but essentially been confirmed as a part of a scheme of political extortion among a very, very slimy person in the party. This seems to be the case. But yeah, I wouldn't call them grapers. Now, onto the issue of whether or not this is going to create like a schism in the Republican Party. I don't think this is a question that will be answered until 2028. Because what's going to happen is you're going to see all of this, and you're going to see kind of when there's a lull, when there's no big bill or whatever, you're going to see kind of weird stuff like this. And then when there's something for the party to rally behind, then they'll rally behind it, rinse and repeat. But in 2028 is when the decision's going to happen, of when kind of the old losers that have lost and have lost so badly that have effectively, they have lost so badly at the expense of my life and the expense of my youth and the expense of my future. You're going to see those people try with all of the money that they can to claw it back. And you're going to see a lot of people like me who have felt what losing looks like in their youth, and essentially, like, you're seeing people that make good money, 75 median income, and they have to live with 5 other people in the house because housing is so bad, because of the policies these people do, because of what they have not accomplished. You're going to see that type of grassroots versus the kind of old head losers. And I think that's a question, that schism will happen in 2028, and that's going to be decided in that Republican primary.
Connor?
Yeah, no, he gave me a lot, so I'll try to grapple with as much as I can. So my frustration, and I do agree that it is it's a toss-up ball that's in the air that's going to be decided in 26 and 28. So for instance, if the economy has price shocks in agriculture and in construction that ends up pissing off the average working class or middle class person, then I think that the Democrats could sweep in the midterms. If, however, the supply chains adjust, and then as a result, we kind of stabilize as an economy, then I think Trump could defend in the midterms if we had a strong economy. And then when it comes to 28, I actually do think, especially with the speech to the generals recently, that whatever anxieties or fears I had of Trump installing himself as dictator for life, that effectively evaporated with the speech to the generals. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think there's going to be a military coup. I don't think there's going to be a dictatorship. I think he's going to pass the baton. Now, it seems like right now, passing the baton is going to be to J.D. Vance. He seems to be getting tapped on the shoulder as the next king. And so the question is J.D. Vance charismatic enough to carry the weight of MAGA, the MAGA movement going forward? And is he like autistic and dissident right-wing enough in order to appeal to the kind of like the anger of the young people? And is he articulate and technocratic enough in order to attract kind of like the more normie Republicans? And that is also up in the air. We have to see how he debates. We have to see how he talks to the public. We have to see how he rides his own bicycle without the training wheels of being Donald Trump's successor. Now, with the housing, cost of living, mass immigration, border security, and isolationism, what's interesting is the popularity of isolationism, the popularity. I'm all for border security. I'm all for vetting every single human being that comes into the country. However, I think what's going to happen is we are going to understand relatively quickly in the next few years why we involved ourselves in world affairs. We're going to understand in the next few years why we allowed so many Hispanic immigrants to come here and work in agriculture and construction. And it's going to be because we're going to experience economic shocks. We're going to experience political shocks. There's going to be other incidents like critical incidents like Iran that are going to force the United States of America to defend its international empire. And so as a result, I think that Donald Trump is effectively creating a power vacuum and economic instability, and people hate economic instability, and power abhors a vacuum. So it's kind of a toss-up on whether or not he survives the conditions that he himself is creating.
Bumbadum.
I mean, I just don't care. There's not really, and you can go and you can talk to a lot of people like me. You know, there's this, the economy is, my iPhone's gonna get so expensive if we deport all these people. Everything's gonna get so expensive. And the issue with that is, I just see this, and it's such a loser mentality. It's such a loser mentality to go and say that we need to import a bunch of South American slaves, and not only that, let's start there, and we'll take the tangent in my mind. We need to import a bunch of South American slaves to go pick our groceries, right? This is the impetus, is that we need this low cost labor to keep prices down. And first of all, no, we have machinery. You can look up literally every crop, and there's a machine, not just for every crop. There's a machine for like 10 types of crops. This exists. We can automate. I hate to do the abundance like Ezra Klein thing, but there's a greater vision for our country, and it's so sad to say no. We just need to keep importing the third world. But even worse than that is it's just such an immoral thing to do. I mean, what was it in the Biden administration? 300,000 kids went missing, right? It was 300,000 kids went missing for child sex and labor. Right, and in California, we saw I think it was a marijuana farm that got busted, and like half the people that they found were kids. And we're sitting there going, well, I think when we deport all these people, we're going to figure out why we were importing child slaves to work on farms. And it's like, what are we talking about here? This is so evil.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but this is where I think like selective memory and also kind of like selective outrage is where I'm not going to necessarily follow you, I suppose, is when we're talking about like slaves. Okay, I think of chattel slavery. Chattel slavery in the United States of America was you had a less than subsistence. You didn't have an income. You lived in a shack. There was no air conditioning. You got your ass beat if you stepped out of line. If you ran away, you got hunted down and slaughtered with dogs. If you fought against your master or fought against the white man, you got hung. Your wife or girlfriend was raped and impregnated. Your children were sold. Your wife or girlfriend was sold. You were converted to a different religion forcibly. You were converted to a different language forcibly. Comparing. Because that's the thing. It's like I live in Central Florida. It's a fairly purple, multiracial, multi-ethnic place, and the agriculture workers and the construction workers around here are not. They're not subject to those conditions. The conditions they're in is they do work hard, they do work their asses off, but they come here. They make what's a good wage compared to back home. They live 2 or 3 people to an air-conditioned apartment. They share a truck. They work their dicks off. They do their remittances, and they build a middle-class life back home. And that's why they're here. So again, like, we can talk about kids. We can talk about human trafficking. We can talk about all that kind of stuff. But comparing this to chattel slavery, I think is bullshit.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have used the word slavery. Maybe indentured servitude is a better word for using children to pick marijuana leaves so people can get high. This is that are illegally trafficked into the country. This is such a. First of all,
would I be mistaken to say that Connor's POV here is that the sheer amount of kids that get trafficked is still not that high, and it's not worth it maybe to change that versus getting rid of so many people that are working hard?
Because his position is they're not slaves from the 1600s, so it's not that bad. Like this is actually what you just said.
Bumbadum, I do think that's descriptively true. However, this is what you're going to find in the conversation. Hold on real quick. This is where you're going to find the conversation is legitimately different than maybe like an abundance liberal. So an abundance liberal would say, well, on the whole, 300,000 out of 12 million is only this percentage, and who gives a shit? No, that's not what I'm going to say. As a former like law enforcement officer, I'm going to say no. Like that's not the way that we should be operating. The way that we should be operating is America has an economic need, okay? And these people should be working in dignified conditions that are substantively better than slavery. And it should be a win-win-win across the board. It shouldn't be this black, gray market situation where people are getting paid under the table, people are getting kidnapped, people are being turned into sex slaves, people are being turned into agricultural slaves. No, none of that shit. Obviously, what I would want or what I think is ideal is a secure border. I do think we should have spent $21 billion on a border wall. I do think that CBP and ICE have a role in making sure that we're not constantly swamped by hundreds of thousands or millions of immigrants. What I think the problem is, or what the technocratic criticism of what Trump is doing, is the fact that he's doing mass deportation operations that are targeting people that don't fucking make sense. Like people who have either been here for a short time or a long time, but they're escaping illegal. Failed states, communist failed states. They're illegal. Socially and economically productive. They're not criminals. They're applying for asylum, and yet they're still getting deported. And that doesn't fucking make sense.
Applying for asylum, the problem with saying, like, well, they're applying for asylum is that, unfortunately, for your argument, Biden removed this as a viable rebuttal because they made it so you could apply for asylum the moment you walked up to a border, got a phone handed to you by some NGO funded by the fucking US government, and they said, install this app, and then you're going to apply for asylum, and then we'll just let you in. So applying for asylum means nothing. None of that means anything. And beyond it's totally unacceptable that people are here for 20 years. No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Well, let's take a broader view. I want to take a broader view of this and ask the following question. How many people are refugees and people who wouldn't really make sense to get rid of, people who are, quite valuable and have like a sufficient reason to be here versus the amount of people that are going to cause problems in the next several decades, and is there any way that we can figure that out? And by problems in the next several decades, no, just to finish my thought, by problems in the next several decades, I don't just mean, that there's going to be criminals. I mean that, is there a way we will know that the people that are going to be in this country are going to be participating in this country in such a way with all the rights and privileges that American citizens have, so they would continue the dream of the founding fathers as opposed to the reality of where they came from? That's an important question to ask.
Yeah, and Bumbadum, if I could real quick, we actually have an answer for this, and it actually goes along with Bumbadum's argumentation, which is effectively 4% are legitimate asylum applicants that get approved. 96% of the people who come across our border and apply for asylum are economic migrants who end up getting rejected due to not having like a strong enough asylum case. So yeah, and
they stay here, but they stay here. They don't go home. They get rejected and they stay here. This is a part of the problem. This is why all these people, they say, oh, they're deporting asylum seekers. They're deporting asylum seekers. It's like, well, they got rejected and they stayed in the U.S.
Sure. There's anecdotal cases, but I know that you probably won't give a shit about those anecdotal cases, so I'll just move. So I agree with you that this is where I think the conversation will be a little bit different than usual. I don't think that it is the United States moral obligation to be the economic bastion of Central and South America. I think that we should effectively take in the people that are economically and socially beneficial to us. And to Lev's point, I think that we should have this is something, believe it or not, a dissident right-wing thinker, the distributors told me, is that in the late 19th, early 20th century, there was a proactive, through the public education system, proactive propagandistic attempt to force Germans and Irish to think of themselves as white and to think of themselves as American. And that was necessary in order to form kind of the social fabric that we have now. I think that is something that we should bring back, that public education needs to reinforce American civics, and integration needs to be a priority.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, this is, my favorite meme is the melting pot meme, because everybody will talk about the melting pot. I don't know if you actually know what the melting pot is. The original play was essentially, the guy believed, I'm spacing on his name, this is this Jewish guy that essentially believed that America was God's crucible, and that he would take all of the different European races and convert them into this single American white, which is pretty funny. I think it's a hilarious thing that this word has been transformed. But I don't think you can then take that this like there are degrees, right? There are degrees where maybe you might be able to one day after 150 years get an Irish, a German, and an Anglo in the same room and be like, yeah, we're all American. I don't think you can do that. And I think Thomas Jefferson was pretty much right when it came to what he believed should have been done about the issue of like slavery in the country, which is that he believed that that there need to be a sort of a separation because there would be existential fallout, and I think we're kind of seeing that. But
so hold on. I want to press you on this though, because this is one of the things where I feel like we're borderline living in different worlds. So you mentioned that the losers, the neoconservatives, the moderate conservatives, the corporate
the people
Republicans,
that lost elections and made the country worse, the losers.
well, not just that, but like arguably Bush, even if he didn't identify as a neoconservative, he governed as a neoconservative, right? Like laissez-faire economics, military intervention overseas, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Reagan as well, by the way, with the amnesty.
Sure, and people are now arguing about Reagan's legacy because he was pro-gun control, pro-immigration amnesty.
It was terrible. These people sucked.
Well, right. So then that's where the Republican Party, in my opinion, has totally shifted in the past decade, where it's borderline unrecognizable to the principles and values that I was raised with. But I want to ask you, because you kind of did make it personal. You said that these losers who have represented us and either lost elections and or they had bad policies that fucked over the American people, in your eyes, they had kind of like, I don't know, sabotaged your life to some degree. And then not just that, they were kind of responsible for the sabotaging of the modern American plight. And you kind of put it in existential language. And I just don't think the stats like bear out an existential threat. So can you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I think you can look at the demographic change in the last 30 years, in the last 40 years. I mean, it has been so rapid that young people now live in a totally fundamentally different world. So the city I live in is let's say one of these large dystopian West Coast cities. 30 years ago, this city looked completely different. You did not see signs in Star Wars languages. You did not have the type of activity and the behavior. You did not. You could go down the street and you could simply hear the language of your nation. This is not what you experience anymore in many American cities. And this is the case everywhere. The demographic change across this nation has been so fast. There's unbelievable. It is completely, this is why you and I live in different worlds, is because you and I grew up in such different worlds. The world that when I got to form all of my worldly beliefs after age 10, because I'm so ahead of the curve. But in this world was in 2010, 2012, for example. I think the best example, I was just talking to a friend about this, and I'll stop here, but in 2014, Barack Obama started the actions against the school to prison pipeline. In 2014, he threatened to sue with Title IV, Title VI, or threatened DOE funding cuts to any school that called the police on kids that were committing criminal behavior. This is not something you experience. And I guarantee you, what I saw in high school was a fundamentally different world than what you saw in high school. And it's not just that, it is every single thing from when I was 14 to when I'm 25. That's why.
And can I ask this? So I'm in my late 30s. Are you still in your 20s?
Yeah, I'm mid 20s.
Okay. So hold on. So I heard what you said. But I am going to press you on it, okay? Because the perspective that you have, I think, is relatively speaking ahistorical. Because if we look at the founding of the nation, we're talking about 13 colonies on the East Coast, and all of the shit that we were dealing with then, we were dealing with French colonists. We were dealing with Native Americans. You're talking about barbarism from savages. You didn't have black people being racist and beating up white kids. You had Native Americans raiding cities and villages and scalping people. That's the kind of shit that was going on. And that lasted through the entire 19th century. Then when we're talking about the middle to late 19th century with the Civil War, we actually had it as a part of our social fabric up until 150 years ago that black people were subhuman. They were abhuman. They were a different kind of human, and you could technically own them. And that was a huge part of our economy. Our economy and our culture. And we fought a war that killed 500,000 people. When you're talking about the early 20th century, well, actually, I should go back a little bit. Benjamin Franklin, when you're saying oh, well, I don't hear the language of thy nation anymore. I hear Spanish, or I hear, Chinese, or I hear this, or I hear that. There's a letter from Benjamin Franklin at the founding of the nation where he says, we're taking in so many fucking Germans that if we don't pay attention, the United States is going to become a German project, not an Anglo project. And as a result, we're going to be subsumed by these swarthy, shitbag Germans. And so for me, it's like, if we look at this historically, we've been in infinitely more precarious existential times than this. Even looking at crime stats, like I'd love to get into crime stats, but I've been yapping for 2 minutes, so I'll shut up for now.
One quick thing before Bumbadum or yourself would reply to this, because I am very curious, bringing back this idea of, well, America shuts itself down for a certain amount of time. In the 20th century, I believe that was in the 1920s, that they restricted immigration severely. And I think that that was the opportunity for a lot of the migrants who came here in the early 20th century to start getting more into what was considered to be, the golden ideal of the WASP. But also, I wonder this, how much did this have to do with shame? How much does this have to do with the WASPs talking about how great they are and how low all of these people are and, you'll never make it, yada, yada, yada. It's kind of fat shaming in a way for the migrants who came in here. So I'm not sure if the same thing would work right now. We had a very interesting conversation with Steve Boyle and Bogbeef on an earlier episode. You guys should definitely check it out. I even made like an animated AI thing of Bogbeef as Macho Man Randy Savage in that clip. But anyway, we were talking about this gradient, where on one hand you have a kind of authoritarian regime that you would see, let's say in Singapore, for instance, where even if people live from different cultures, they're able to get along with each other because they're forced to get along with each other through this power that's constantly, watchful of any wrongdoing. And then on the other hand, you have people who, are more homogeneous, have the same culture, and there's much less fear that something's going to go wrong there. So if we have this gradient over here, where exactly America is going to be in that gradient, I think that the concern that Bumbadum has, as well as Bogbeef, is that we're not doing anything at all, like the whole is-ought situation. We're not doing anything at all to address whatever potential differences may come about through the lack of minding the store, through the lack of understanding, well, what exactly is going on in the mind of a lot of these new people who are here. Is it just a matter of, well, they like football and they like American shows, so now they're Americans, or is it more complicated than that?
Sorry, I'll let Bumbadum go because I talked most last. But no, I think one of the things that I disagree with liberals on is that they think, oh, well, we'll just like kind of boil in the soup of American culture and we'll all become one thing eventually. Whereas I think there should be an intentional integrative effort, because I think that if you don't reinforce the libertarian or liberal roots of American philosophy, I think this project will disintegrate.
And before Bumbadum responds, I think that what you got on right now has everything to do with his dissatisfaction with the so-called beautiful losers of the Republican Party, because I think that he sees those people as people who are unwilling to cut the Gordian knot. And if the Gordian knot is not cut, then all these things we're talking about are never going to be fixed. At least I don't want to speak for him, but that's what I'm saying right now. So, Bumbadum, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say that's about right. Yeah, there is this kind of funny, I can't help but call it a meme at this point, but this kind of funny meme of like, well, because America started as a pan-European project, essentially, right? Ostensibly it was. And since, 1790 Naturalization Act, we kind of understood this in terms of like legality, what was allowed into the country or what was preferred in the country at the time, was a pan-European project. We can get into like various letters about like, well, there's too many Irish, there's too many Germans, there's too many Italians, but like they were let in legally speaking because it was a pan-European project. And this gets expanded into like, well, that just means, what did Reagan say? Reagan said that everybody was an American, if they came here, like whatever that stupid old guy said. And the result of it is what you end up seeing. Whatever you
sorry, we just disagree. Like, sorry, real quick, I want to let you keep going, but there's a quote from the movie Full Metal Jacket that I always throw out where he uses a Vietnamese slur. There's a general, and he's like, inside every Vietnamese slur is an American waiting to crawl out. And unironically, I think that's based. But anyway, sorry,
funny.
Continue.
But like, Yeah, there's this idea that you kind of can just keep expanding, I guess, the gradient, right? You can kind of just keep expanding it out, and as long as you just indoctrinate them into what being an American is, then they can come in. And then what we've kind of seen is I just don't think this would ever work out. And I just like I've met these people. I've met people that have been in the country for 30 years that are legal immigrants. And because of where I live, like it just so happens to be the case that like half the population of this state is just unknown and is just illegal immigrants. And they've been in here forever. They're not American. They are not American in any way that I'm an American. There's no assimilation, there's no indoctrination, there's no conversion. There's it just doesn't happen. And the worst part is that the balkanization that has occurred universally across this country has now encouraged that, and there's no way to fix this now. Like how do you fix the fact that if you look at LA as like the best example because of the sprawl, you can find like a 10 square mile radius that is literally nothing but Chinese people that speak Chinese. They don't speak English. You go to a restaurant, they don't speak English. The signs are in Chinese. What do you do about that? What do you do about the fact that on this part of LA, it's all in Spanish? What do you do about the fact that in this part of LA, it's in like like Azerbaijani or whatever? Like it's everything everywhere, and you're just going to keep seeing that balkanization.
Yeah, so this is again where I think I differ from other people, where I think that integration has to be an intentional governmental effort, and what I mean by that is so my experience is a little bit different. I do live in a fairly cosmopolitan purple area. I live in Central Florida, but in my cosmopolitan Central Floridian area, I went to a law enforcement academy, and the law enforcement academy was 80% Hispanic. Like every single last name was Gutierrez, Herrera, this, that, the other, right? It was all Hispanic. And yet, out of a class of 30 people, 2 people spoke Spanish. And that's because, yeah, their parents like came over, they only spoke the language, they worked their jobs, they stayed in their ethno-religious enclaves, but their kids went to American public school. And as a result of going to American public school and being born here, they learned English, they learned American civics, they, wanted to be a part of their community, they grew up on American pop culture and all that kind of stuff. And so as a result, like the Spanish speaking police instructors were giving the class shit because they were saying how valuable being bilingual would be in this job. And yet the Hispanics in Central Florida were so anglicized and so integrated that they were missing a critical skill for law enforcement. So that's where I just think that we're probably living in different Americas.
Do you think the Muslims in Dearborn, Michigan are like fundamentally American because they like Kanye West and speak English?
No, but I think that if you give it a few decades, or a century, I think they could be.
Where in Central America are they from? By the way, sorry to interrupt, but I'm just curious, Connor. And by the way, Connor, you don't have to mute. It turns out that sound was from somewhere else. But do you know where in Central America or South America a lot of them are from?
Oh, yeah, I would say easily probably 10 or 20% of them were Cuban, 10 or 20% of them were Puerto Rican, and the rest were Mexican. So it's probably like 50-60% Mexican, 10 or 20% Caribbean, 10 or 20% different kind of Caribbean. So I would say that the Caribbeans seem to, Puerto Rico is obviously an American territory, but Puerto Rico and Cubans seem to actively want to integrate. And I would say Mexicans, it's like a coin flip. They either love America and want to integrate, or they're like, fuck you, you colonized us. I'm indigenous. It's like a 50-50 coin flip.
I noticed, by the way, this comment over here from one of your people, Connor. LOL, what a regarded question. Yeah, I'm happy they're being very careful about this stuff. But when it comes to something like that, though,
Lev's nice.
When it comes to something like that, though, it is interesting because it almost feels like, now they're talking about the differences between people. That's not very good. So it feels like your audience is a little bit more sensitive to that kind of thing, even though I think it is important to take a look at these different cultures, how exactly they react to the United States, to integration, all of that, because these are all very important questions, and it matters as far as how long it would take to integrate certain people more than others.
Well, I've talked to so I lived in California for a bit, and I do spend a lot of time on the online political debate sphere. So I'll concede to Bumbadum that there are liberals and there are progressives and there are leftists who effectively take the political position that like well, we don't have to force any kind of integration because, that's racist or whatever. I think that's stupid. I'm
Wait.
sorry that you
I think
live in a shitty state that takes that on as policy. But I
this is
would
not
say
state
that's not the
policy.
entire
This
country.
is federal policy for like the last 30 years, and this only changed this last election. Even in 2016, with Trump's really, really, really unfortunately staffed administration, the standards for like how to even like getting people to integrate, they've been so low. And even the fact that the legal systems were not enforced means that these people had no need to integrate. So when we have 20 million people, or how many have you, under the Biden administration come in illegally, right? Who knows how many came in? None of these people integrated. And there was no need to. There's no want to. There's no requirement to. None of them ever will. This was totally allowed. And this is, and then you see in the legal efforts, it still happens.
But okay, this is where I feel like, I'm not trying to overly stereotype and feel like, you know what, I'll skip that part of the comment. This is where I feel like statistics don't necessarily bear out what you're saying. And what I mean by that is that if you look at criminality in the United States of America, effectively what happened in the pre-World War II era was we were at like a relatively high level of homicide and crime in the United States of America. It was the Prohibition era. So we were around like 10 per 100,000 homicides. And it was a time of like gangsters and violence and death and murder. That was very popular. Then it looks like we kind of peaked out around 1940, and it looks like all of America went to war. And then it seems like through the 50s and 60s, Americans were sick of war. So we kind of have like a post-war lull. And this is idyllic America, where we're at 5 per 100,000 homicides. We're actually largely segregated. This is before integration. This is before the Civil Rights Act. We also don't have a very large Hispanic population, because I think we had pretty strict immigration controls in reference to, correct me if I'm wrong, the Hart-Celler Act. But then what you see is a spike in crime. And the spike in crime correlates with the Hart-Celler Act and mass immigration from Central America, South America, and Asia. But this also correlates with the drug war. And so we see that peak out in the 90s. But what ends up happening is probably since 92 or 94, we start using the era of mass incarceration, modern medical technology, video games, and the internet as distractions. And you basically see the homicide rate and a lot of crime effectively cut in half back down to the 50s and 60s level. And so I have to kind of have to poke you on this is, are you really seeing like the fraying of the social fabric and the destruction of America? Or are we kind of in the same level of peace and tranquility that we were in the 50s and 60s, but you have a smartphone so you can see every grisly homicide that happens in the world?
I mean, maybe you could make that argument. I think you could make that argument, and correct me if I'm wrong, if like, what is it, 2/3, is it 1/3 or 2/3 of all police precincts in the United States of America don't report their crime data to the FBI anymore? This has been going on since 2022.
I don't know if that's true.
I know in New York, it's
I've used the UCR for decades.
In New York, 3/4 of their precincts do not report their crime data to the FBI. And so, like, this then brings into question, what even is the data that we have when we look at crime data even accurate? And then you have to look at currently states with certain majorities of populations that have done a lot of pro-crime policies and just don't prosecute and don't put people in jail. And even then, not even just in pro-crime states, but in the cities and red states that do this, right? So, for example, Dallas is a great example, where the DA in Dallas said that he will not prosecute anyone that steals something from a store that's less than $750. The same DA who straight up has let like an illegal immigrant who admitted to murdering somebody, stabbing them like 8 times and lighting their body on fire, he gave him 8 months of probation. So
there is another example I want to bring up, which is very recent, about Kendra Briggs, who was apparently a Biden-appointed judge who gave no jail time to the teens responsible for attacking the Doge employee Big Balls. So if you guys recall what happened to him, so they got let out on, what was it, on bail, or what do you call it when people are, I'm so dumb right now, what do you call it when people... Probation. Thank you so much. They were let out on probation, and so that would be another example of what you're talking about, right?
But no, not really. What I'm saying is, I think the institutions that even present this data are so far gone and so bad across so much of this country that I don't know if you can really even trust these numbers anymore. And this is wildly, like, it's super, super concerning to me. Like, when you see, like, California, like, Newsom, the account, he's been going off being like, California has a better crime rate than Texas or Alabama or, like, Florida and, like, all these other states. And you go and look, and it's like, oh, cool, LA County Police Precinct just doesn't report, like, their crime data to the FBI. New York doesn't report their crime data. New York City Precinct doesn't report their crime data to the FBI. He's just there, and you look at this, and you're like, what is... Like, I want to believe maybe that it's just the phones are making us crazy, because it's a really great, easy answer, and it would make so many things easier to just be like, okay, if we just put the phones away, then maybe we could all be happy. But then I go out and I see with my eyes, like, no, I don't think so. I think everything is actually just worse than it was like 30 years ago.
Well, okay, so hold on. Then there's another thing that I'm gonna throw your way. Okay, so nostalgia is a motherfucker. Okay, and so what I would say is, like, I idealize the 1990s because I was born in the late 80s, and I do think the 90s was awesome for a lot of reasons. I think a lot of the music was good. I think some of the cars were cool. I think a lot of the media was cool. I think the action movies were awesome. All that kind of stuff. But I do also have to realize that in, like, 1994, like 2 years before, like, a bunch of my favorite music and favorite movies were released, it was one of the most violent years in, like, American,
Yeah,
American
I'm not going to
history.
deny. I don't think, and by the way, I don't think that crime in the U.S. is necessarily worse than it was in the 90s. I just have a massive doubt for whatever the numbers are, because I don't think any of these institutions can be trusted, because I think they are so occupied by evil people.
Well, okay, so hold on. I was going to come your way, though, with a little bit of a concession. I think that this is going to be where, again, I'm going to defer from some other people. I had, as an example, in Central Florida, and I do love my home state. I do love the area that I live. But we had a female DA take over in Orlando, and she changed the dog fighting rules. No fucking idea why, but she changed it from 2 characteristics to 5. Yep. And then one of my friends who worked for Orange County Sheriff's Office, he found a guy who had 5. He had dogs, he had steroids, he had, cages.
Yeah.
He had this.
He had a great relationship with Twitch, so everything was fine.
Well, in that, hold on. So you're kind of joking, like, like a relationship with, like, people in power is how you get away with shit. But unironically, that's what ended up happening was the DA dismissed the dogfighting case. Even though it had met her bar for the standards of evidence necessary in order to do a prosecution. And, like, dude, I'm a white person. I fucking love dogs. So that just, like, infuriated me to no end. And I'm also thinking about, like, what kind of culture are you creating where you catch somebody red-handed committing a fucking evil crime and then you let them go? And so I think that the balance between our perspectives is probably correct, where I just want, what I'm trying to do with my content, what I'm trying to do with my perspective is I'm trying to unironically reach people like Bumbadum and say, like, hey, this isn't the apocalypse. Like, it's not over. You can still find a nice girl. You can still get married.
You're so not that.
No, you can find a nice white girl. You can get pregnant. You can have kids. You can live in a good community. You can do all this shit.
Here's what this may come down.
That doesn't mean that there isn't fucked up shit going on that we need to take care of.
Okay, here's what all of these conversations end up coming down to. It's the concern that people like Bumbadum have that in several decades, there's going to be people who, yes, like, they could speak English and they're into American culture and all of that, but if they came from cultures which were more high time preference, then that high time preference will be retained no matter the education, no matter all the efforts that are done, unless we have a magic button that gives every single kid growing up in America a tutor, like a personal tutor to bring them through all of these rigorous situations. Like, his approach, if I'm not mistaken here, is that it would just take an extraordinary amount of work if we are talking about not just integration, but if we're talking about enough of an emphasis on changing enough people that are going to be in positions of power in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, so that they would be low time preference, right? Like, would that be a good goal?
Can you articulate that for me, though? Just because high time versus low time, my guess is, like, ADD and incapable of focusing on long form necessary tasks.
Living in the moment.
Yes.
Living in the moment. That would be a good way to phrase it. And I think what the concern here is that if you look around, a lot of cultures in the world, a lot of people are living in the moment. You know, they may not be thinking as far in advance in terms of, you know, how their society runs, which is okay, but we don't really want that quality. So number one, is that necessarily the case? And number two, if that is the case, how do we fix that?
Yeah, I got a quote for you after Bumbadum responds.
Yeah,
Okay, Bumbadum, go for it.
I think, I kind of asked this earlier, when it was kind of a poke at kind of a joke, which was that, do we consider the Muslims that have essentially colonized Dearborn, Michigan, American because maybe they listen to Kanye or Drake, and maybe the kids of the people that were brought in by Obama speak English? And his answer was, yeah, maybe in like 100 years they might be American, like they might all speak English and they might all integrate. And I'm like, I'm not going, first of all, I'm not going to cede my nation to the idea that maybe in 100 years, first of all, this one religion in the world that has had such unbelievable occupancy and violence and has managed to maintain it through their insane beliefs of
not just a religion, political
marriage.
system. That's an important caveat here.
The other interesting aspect about it, of course, is the proclivities towards first cousin marriage, which will then create all sorts of intelligence issues. I don't think these people would ever integrate. And the way that they get here is not indicative of them wanting to integrate. This is indicative of people that want to colonize. And then we see it happen in Dallas. We see the Epic City, that whole thing, an Islamic center community. You know, these are people that are not looking to integrate. They're looking to colonize. And I don't think that it's appropriate that the land of my people, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, I have 6 generations going back here, that I would say, you know what, I'll risk what you guys left to me to see if these people will do something that none of them have ever done in ever recorded history.
Well, okay. So, So hold on. In 16, I basically decided I was never Trump all the way back in 15. And while I was never Trump, I was not able to vote for Hillary Clinton. Number one, because I think she's like a lizard person who eats babies in order to like extend her lifespan. But also because she effectively said at the peak, in my opinion, of like ISIS jihadist terrorism in Europe, and immediately after the Pulse nightclub shooting, she was like, oh yeah, I'm going to bring in 200,000 people from Syria. And it was like, why? Like, what the fuck? Why?
She's also evil. She's terrible.
So the point is, like, I'm a little bit more Islamophobic than the average liberal. Let's put it that way. But that being said, through relationships, I have a few relationships with a few Muslim folks. I would say that Islam is a dualistic religion. And what effectively you need to do in order to get a peaceful version of Islam is that the bar for being Muslim is actually super low. It's like, believe in God, the last day, that Muhammad is his messenger, do good works, and then go on the Hajj if you can afford it. That's like the 5 bars for being considered Muslim, right? And then, but after that, of course, what happens if you actually read the Quran? The first half of the Quran, little edgy, gets a little spicy every now and then. Second half of the Quran is super spicy, super fucked up. And like from a historical perspective, that's because, Muhammad spent the second half of his life at war. And so like a lot of his passages are about conflict and war and conquering people and all that kind of stuff. Well, the easiest way that I've found peaceful Muslims translate that is they're like, oh, well, it's within the historical context of war. Therefore, since I'm at peace with my neighbors, and in the beginning part, Islam says, only God can know where people are going to heaven. Only God can know what's going on. Therefore, like it's up to each man in order to choose his religion. That's like an early surah. They kind of just emphasize the first half of it rather than the second half of it. Mm. And so, I think there's 2 billion Muslims in the world. Do I want 2 billion Muslims to move to the United States tomorrow? Absolutely the fuck not. Do I think that we can keep an under 5% population of Muslims and they can integrate into American society? Yeah, probably.
Connor, I gotta
They
get
don't
in here.
Lev, you're more
integrate.
Islamophobic
They
than
don't
me.
integrate.
I gotta get in here, man. This is very important. So, from the research that I've been doing, there is this thing called abrogation. What abrogation means is that all of the people who are responsible for Islamic jurisprudence and all these various, Hanafi, Hanbali, Maliki, whatever the hell, all these people have agreed that the later passages are much more important than the earlier ones, and if you were to choose between one and the other, it's always going to be the later ones.
No, the Hadith are a fucking nightmare, man. Like Al-Bukhari or whatever.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the Hadith. Like, forget the Hadith for now. I'm just talking about the Quran and the fact that the later passages supersede the earlier passages. And here's the problem. If you have, 5 tourists who come here from Saudi Arabia, obviously it's not a problem. But when you have a culture that's within, Dearborn, Michigan, or whichever city, they are, to their credit, they treat their political system, which is what it is. It's not just a religion, it's a political system. They treat it with a lot of respect. All this jurisprudence that gets passed down from master to disciple, yada, 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 they're not going to get rid of that if there's already enough people there in order to keep everybody in check. And that's the real problem here. If you have tourists, that's one thing. If you have people keeping other people in check, that's another thing.
But here would be my argument. And I will argue that hope isn't a plan. Right. And I'm kind of doing a lot of hoping when it comes to Islam. So I'll admit that. However, I would say that we've seen things that don't make a lot of sense with a strict interpretation of Islam within the past decade or so. Like the previous Saudi king, the one before the one that we have right now, was funding madrasas internationally, was, promoting fundamentalist Islam internationally, was even paying for madrasas and religious conservative schools in Pakistan and in Afghanistan. And then the new prince seems to be, relatively speaking, like a modernizer. And so while he's still Muslim, he still wears the, conservative garb. He still murdered a journalist. People in Saudi Arabia still get, arrested or put to death for consuming drugs or for being whores. He still seems to want to integrate, at least economically, with the Western world. And then when you look at the Abraham Accords and when you look at what's happened with Israel recently, Israel has been accused of effectively committing a genocide in Gaza. And yet Turkey, Egypt, Syria, after Bashar al-Assad was deposed, Jordan and Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, all these countries were, relatively speaking, silent, which would not have been normal a decade ago. A decade ago, every single one of these countries would have been braying for Jewish blood every single night and publicly. It would have been the leaders who are saying our Muslim brothers and sisters are being slaughtered by the state of Israel. We have to do something about this. Now, ultimately, they wouldn't do shit about it, but they would at least radicalize their population into being anti-Jewish, anti-Israel. And so for me, to say that there isn't political opportunity here, I think is blind.
Just I find the line that we're trying to, it feels like we're looking at that scene in where It's Always Sunny, where we have the red lines. We're saying, well, because these Muslims in these countries, one of them, which has been trying to be a part sort of the EU for 10 years, whatever, because these Muslims in these countries aren't sitting there losing their minds and chipping out about Israel. That means that Somalian Muslims in Dearborn, Michigan, who have been here for God knows how long and aren't integrating, are suddenly going to integrate. This is
well,
nothing
I mean,
to do.
I don't know if I did
sorry,
that logic
I don't
chain,
think,
but how the Somalis got here in the first place.
That's where the conversation went, though, right? It was that
Sure.
Well, there's hope for Muslims to integrate in America, and it started with conversation about Dearborn, Ilan Omar, or whatever. And we said, well, there's hope for Muslims because, well, Qatar doesn't hate Israel, and it's what are you doing here?
Well, hold on. So if you want to zero in on the United States, I'm happy to do so. Do you know how the Somalis got here?
From my understanding, a lot of it was essentially refugee programs. Obama essentially airdropping them like it's a Fortnite package.
No, it's from the 1990s. It's
That's
from Black
worse.
Hawk
They've been here
Down.
even longer.
Well, hold on, real quick, because this is the history of it. So it's from the 1990s. The Somali Civil War was horrible, hundreds of thousands of dead. And it was actually Christian families from Dearborn that sponsored Muslim refugees in order to come over during the early 90s. And so that's where a lot of the population first came over. Now, since then, I would say what Dearborn has kind of become is like, oh, if you're Muslim, then go move to Dearborn because there's so many Muslims there that effectively you'll have a little slice of home. So even if you're like Ethiopian or Somali or Lebanese or whatever, move to Dearborn because you'll have people to talk to who share the same religion with you, and you can kind of have like a firm rooting in your religion. Because let's face it, if you live amongst a bunch of degenerate secular Christians, your kids are probably going to end up as secular alcoholic degenerates.
I kind of think it's interesting that what you just described is essentially a refutation of classical liberal, classical Republican belief on, well, the legal ones that come in will eventually integrate because their kids won't, and they won't want their kids to integrate. I mean, you just described essentially American culture as degenerate secular alcoholics, and that Muslims would never want to integrate into America. There's an incongruence.
I think the parents don't. I think the kids end up doing it though.
Regardless, there's an incongruence here with what you were describing has happened and what you and the effective policies that I would say that you broadly represent that has occurred in the last like 40 years. Pre-Trump, let's say the pre-Trump Republican policies. There is what that is has effectively failed. You have just described in a masterclass, I couldn't even say it better, those policies failing.
Well, hold on though. The reason why maybe you would say it failed or is failing is because they haven't integrated. I would understand that, but I also think that it would be weird. It would be like an awkward conversation between so for instance, like my friend Ali, my friend Gassim, and the reason why it would be an awkward conversation is because effectively they are the people that you're talking about, where you're like, oh, well, if you're still like devout Muslim, but you listen to Kanye West and you speak English, are you really American? And I think that's one of the things, or one of the powers of liberalism, capital L, not like liberal Democrat, more like liberal, like founding fathers, is that maximal human freedom, as far as I can tell with the American project, what it really asks you to do as a United States citizen is we don't have to agree on religion. We don't have to agree on politics necessarily, although we should solve our problems at the voting booth. And what we should do as Americans is we should work our jobs, pay our bills, pay our taxes, take care of our family, take care of our community. And as long as we don't infringe on the freedoms of other people around us, then ultimately the state will leave us alone. And so if you're talking about like integrating Muslims into being American patriots, wearing like Confederate flag bikinis and shooting fucking fireworks off of their boats,
I think the American flag is a good compromise.
Sorry, what's that?
I'm not asking them to wear a Confederate flag. I'm asking them to fucking fly an American flag. I think that's a good compromise. They won't even do that.
But I think that's where we need to get into the nuance, though, where specifically, while I agree that the Muslim refugees from war-torn countries should be grateful, countries, they should be, while they should be grateful that they got into the Western world, some of them, I would say, are ungrateful, and some of them are spiteful, and some of them are dicks, but they view themselves as being justified in their assholery because they viewed their failed states as failed because of the interventions of the West. I'm not saying that's correct. I'm saying that's the way they see it.
I gotta step in here. So if we're talking about your Muslim friends, I'm sure they're wonderful people and they're quite liberal in various aspects of their lives. But we got to keep in mind the Hall of Mirrors effect, where if it's not just them, if it's their family, their auntie, whatever, other people who are in the neighborhood, imagine the scenario where in some distant Mad Max future, you have their descendants that are gathered in a crowd where they found some gay guy and they're throwing him off a roof. would any one of them dare to do anything to help this gay guy out, even if maybe they were passed on some kind of a lesson from their grandparents about tolerance, yada, yada, yada. The hive mind, the Hall of Mirrors hive mind still ends up reigning control when there are enough people that agree on this. And when we're talking about enough people, when we have a few people that start having kids and start passing lessons on to those kids, yada, 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 look at Iran. Really quick, if you look at the golden age, the so-called golden age of Islam, which is really the golden age of Iran, back then you had people who were in the intellectual class that, yes, like they used Islam, but they were pretty liberal for the time. Yet eventually that civilization, you know, because of the migrations that happened and the wars and the Mongols and the Turks and all of that stuff, you know, Hassan's ancestors, because of all that stuff, we ended up with a situation where what was retained was this very rigid structure where you got these antennas that are sending out the frequency and people are praying 5 times a day and then they're rotating around the cube and all that stuff. So that's the stuff that ends up getting retained when we get to Mad Max times, you know, when things fall apart.
Sure.
And that's the concern when it comes to,
So all I was going to say is that kind of goes back to me, my perspective earlier where, do I think that we could keep Muslims under 5% of the United States and they would largely be chill and integrative and they would listen to hip hop and maybe they drink alcohol on occasion, maybe they have premarital sex and maybe they don't throw gay people off of rooftops? Do I think that's possible or even probable? Yes, but I do keep the caveat that this is exactly what you just said is why I would not want 2 billion Muslims to move to the United States tomorrow. Because I think at that point, even greater than 10%, even greater than 20%, even greater than 25%, you would talk about those ethno-religious enclaves, ethno-religious, linguistic, racial enclaves that would effectively become communities within communities, and then they would splinter into their own thing. I actually am I understand that legalistically, the Muslims are capable of building a private community within Texas and then creating HOA laws that are going to be relatively discriminatory. So everybody who moves there is going to be Muslim. I understand that they're within their legal rights to do that. But I do think that that's going to present obvious. It's going to present obvious problems if they start trying to do like female genital mutilation or honor killings or shit like that. That's obviously going to be a fucking problem.
Yeah, I don't want my Texas suburbs to be seeded where we'll say it can go as bad as like honor killings. So once we start hitting honor killings, then maybe we should do something about it. Like I don't like that, but I think I think we're kind of maybe going a little bit too far. I think we've kind of circled the drain.
We might be because we've been talking about mass immigration for like 30 minutes, and I'm not for mass immigration.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're for it. I just do think
here's how we can get back on track. How we can get back on track. What's related to the mass immigration question is whether or not the Mitt Romneys of the world, the people that Connor would consider to be more of the type of Republicans he would want to see, as opposed to the MAGA Groyper faction or whatever. Would they have enough power in order to create the kind of world that both you and Connor would prefer to live in? Because I think Bumbadum's problem is that he does not see them being strong in any way.
First, but I don't even think that the Republicans that I support are capable of creating the world that I or Bumbadum want. But I'll let Bumbadum answer.
Okay.
First.
And by the way, everybody, sneed those super chats and subscribe to BreakTheRules.tv. I love Connor, but you guys got to check out Break the Rules right now. I bring on people who are from completely different social circles. I've had Curtis Yarvin on. I've had Styx Hexenhammer 666 on. Jason Giorgiani, one of the smartest people I know. He's this brilliant Iranian philosopher. Check out the videos, BreakTheRules.tv. Anyway, go for it.
Yeah, I kind of used to be one of these. I'm not a black pillar, and I don't like to consider myself a black pillar. There's a lot of white pilling on my Twitter account that's gotten some notoriety recently, but yeah, I'm not a big black pillar guy. I've become much more of like a practical, pragmatic what works. And to me, it seems to be the case that when we look at a lot of these classical, liberal, classical, respectable Republicans, they'll come up with all of these funny names. And what ends up happening is these guys just lose. And we all know they lose. You just admitted they lose. We all know they lose. And I'm just like, well, what wins? What wins, even if on the littlest of things, the big thing with like the big black pill thing was there was a big meme about the Groypers. This is one of the things I hate about them was they were like, we should vote for Gavin Newsom. They were pro Kamala Harris because they don't like Trump. And then you sit there and you look at this administration. I'm like, man, I will vote for anybody that just keeps Stephen Miller doing what Stephen Miller is doing. This guy is just nothing but winning, nothing but great. I love him. He's so perfect. He is like the one good one. We love him so much. And if we just keep him there, and this country might be good. But like he is a winner. He's
it's
actually
so funny
doing...
that you see Stephen Miller's face and you get like a fucking burst of joy in your chest, and I see Stephen Miller's face and I get like a burst of fucking hatred. That's crazy.
He lowers my heart rate. I feel soothed when I see him on TV. When
and he probably lowers. He probably lowers the anti-Semitism too.
I think Stephen Miller is one of the biggest sociopathic pieces of shit.
But Connor, you gotta admit, no person has done more to fight against anti-Semitism on the right than Stephen Miller. Whether you like him or not.
Bumbadum just said he's one of the good ones.
I'm pro-Israel because of Stephen Miller. That's not really true, but it's okay.
Bro. Sorry, I don't know if that's true. But anyway, so hold on. So you asked the question, and I do think it's interesting. So you asked me if, well, actually, hold on, a contention first. So you said that, the moderate Republicans, the neoconservatives, the corporate Republicans, they just lose. But I don't think that's really true. Bush won both. Well, 1 second. Bush won both elections. He won 1,000. He won 04. Then it was Obama's turn. Obama was let's just call him controversial, but he still won his reelection. Trump came afterwards. Trump lost in 20. So regardless, we don't have to get into like election bullshit. But I know we could. But I would argue that Trump lost in 20. And I also think that the MAGA coalition is made up. It's basically 6 political movements in a trench coat. It's like techno-feudalism, immigration hawks who want to limit illegal immigration. It's immigration hawks who want to eliminate all illegal or all immigration. Yeah. So that's like 2 camps right there. Then it's like the techno-feudalists, and then it's like the Christian theocrats and the Christian nationalists. And then it's also like moderate normie Republicans who can't bring themselves to vote for a Democrat, so they just check the Republican box, which, by the way, 55% of people in the Republican Party pick Trump as a first choice, but 45% of the Republican Party would pick another candidate if they could. They just believed you about the winning argument where they thought Trump was the best shot at winning.
He's such a winner. I love this man.
We'll get into that. I still have more to say. I just want to let the combo flow.
Don arc. I want the Don arc, not a monarch. I want a Don arc. That's what I want.
Yeah. Wait, but also, how do you define winning? Are we talking about just winning elections, or are we talking about winning the good future? I don't know if you guys ever played Sonic CD.
Policy he agrees with.
Yeah. Well, it's when I mean winning. Winning doesn't necessarily mean winning elections to me. I think a lot of people win elections, and I think they do nothing with it. I think Greg Abbott is probably one of the best examples. That was going to be my point, by the way. Greg Abbott is a fantastic example of a Republican who's won, who you can go down, and I've done this, you can go down like everything, all of his appointments, all of his staff, and these are just terrible people. And he doesn't accomplish anything. They just passed, I was following their legislature, they just passed like $350 million in subsidies to Hollywood. Texas, right? They do terrible things. So winning elections does not mean winning governance. These are very different things. Trump didn't even win his governance in 2016, by the way. I will say Trump's governance in 2016 could have been much better than it was. But yeah, I think the people that when we look at historically these Republicans, these classical, like the pre-Trump era Republicans, that's the easiest way to say it. Those guys, their governance sucked. It sucked, and it has wrecked in so many ways this country that people did not realize. And I think a lot of it is the worship of old people. We have a geriatric
gerontocracy.
A gerontocracy, that's the word. Thank you so much. These people are that, and so are the Democrats. They're like that too. But these people are that to S tier. They're the S tier geriocrats. They love olds. They will only do olds. And Trump is like the only candidate I've seen in my lifetime that will do anything for a young person to make a young person's life better. He's still a geriocrat. I still agree. He's gonna, he ran on like, I'm not gonna tax Social Security, which is like, dude, but at least he wants to do some things, and a lot of people in his cabinet want to do very impressive things. Russ Vought is probably one of the most impressive. I like Russ Vought even more than Stephen Miller. The fact that he's going to take this shutdown is like, I'm just going to fire people. That is unprecedentedly amazing. This is incredible governance. Better than anything I've seen in my life.
No, we probably need to get into that, because I think we're probably going to end up on different areas of what we think. But I wanted to answer this question because I think it's important. Lev, you asked me if the moderate Republicans or whatever were capable of governing well, and the reason why I was laughing is because the Republicans that I like Bush or Romney or Chris Christie or whatever. What they've effectively done, and I think this is part of the reason why the country is in as bad a straits as it is they talk about everything that I care about, right? They talk about reinforcing the social fabric. Let's get families back prioritized as a part of America. Let's make sure the middle class and the working class are doing good. Let's make sure that we have, not equality, but equality of opportunity. Let's unleash American entrepreneurialism. Let's secure America with strong law enforcement and strong military power. They talk all these things, and then I get a boner. And then what do they actually do when they govern? They just pass tax cuts. And that's all they really do. That's almost exclusively. They haven't reinforced the family. They haven't helped out working class or middle class family. They've watched how laissez-faire economics, in my opinion, has effectively created a K economy where if you're middle class, your income increased substantively and you're doing great. But the amount of people who are in the middle class has decreased substantively. And so what people are finding more and more is that basically they need dual incomes, dual working parents in order to survive. And I'm lucky enough that I can work full-time, and my wife has not worked in the past 5 years. She's actually going back to work part-time to help make ends soon. I'm very lucky that I've been able to do that. But most people in my economic condition have not been that fortunate. They need two incomes. So moderate Republicans are not capable of delivering on this agenda. However, what I wanted to address Bumbadum with is these policies that you're talking about. I think that they feel good. You're sticking your thumb in the eye, or you're sticking your finger in the eye of the neoliberal globalist economists who have given you Funko Pops, but they've also depressed your wages through immigrant labor. I think that you're sticking your thumb in the eye of the military industrial complex that largely sent my generation to die in the Middle East and North Africa for energy security. I think that you're sticking your thumb in the eye of the corporate Republicans who have profited off of, effectively, like you said, importing a slave class into the United States of America. I think that you feel good. I don't think these policies are going to be good. I think these policies are actually probably going to hurt the United States super fucking bad.
Go for it.
I mean, so besides, earlier you listed isolationism, creating this vacuum of power in the global economy. Besides that, and then, well, if we deport all of the farm workers, then suddenly food's going to get more expensive. I think these were the two things you listed. What other policies are the ones that are going to make my life substantially worse?
Yeah, that's actually that is interesting because I am looking at it from a more global and national perspective. I really am. So, and I think that's a privilege to some degree, is to talk about Ukraine or talk about Israel and talk about how Trump gave a carte blanche to Israel to do whatever the fuck it wanted in Gaza, or talk about how we've effectively backstabbed Ukraine, resulting in my opinion, unnecessary, probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of Ukrainian deaths. But Europe hasn't collapsed yet. Ukraine hasn't collapsed yet. And even if it did, you would probably be so insulated from both Gaza and Ukraine that that's not going to affect your life. So I'm trying to orient what will hurt you, quote unquote. And I think the question. So here's the economic questions when it comes to what will hurt you. Will reducing international consumer goods and then increasing the pricing of international consumer goods affect you negatively? That depends on what kind of socioeconomic strata you're in. The other question is, will increasing the price of construction, new construction, be offset by the mass deportations of removing 11 to 25 million people? Like, will there be
100
so many
million. We gotta
intimate...
think big.
Sorry, go ahead.
100 million. We gotta think bigger than that.
Well, hold on. So hold on though. Housing, food, and access to international commercial goods is the way that I would appeal to you individually. But what would you say are the things that you're like, what is the suffering that's being reduced in your life, or what is the good that's being increased in your life?
So I think there are social sufferings that are not measured economically, that people have to deal with every single day. As a result, especially of the last 60 years of immigration policy, and especially as a result of the last few decades of illegal immigration. I think these, while they might have benefited in some sort of economic measure, I think people have lived worse lives. I think it has destroyed communities. I don't support that. I watched as my hometown, where I spent most of my time, which is in an area of Texas. I watched that entire place transform demographically, and it didn't just transform demographically. Like, all of the houses, it became a ghetto. It essentially became a ghetto because of immigration. I saw that happen personally. The reason why people don't like to admit this, but the reason why nobody wants to work like service jobs anymore is because you cannot work with people that speak your language. Every person that I've known, and in my personal experience of working service jobs, you will work with an inordinate amount of people that simply do not speak English. And this is an increasingly common phenomenon. Actually, something that's super interesting, I would heavily recommend people watch it, was Charlie Kirk's last interview with Tucker Carlson. It was like on this Tucker Carlson show, and they go into this about like how young people used to go and they would be a bar back, or they would be like a pizza delivery driver, and or they would like go and do some sort of like low class job for some time. This would be like a normal thing, and this is not anything. People go straight from high school to college and they make terrible decisions. They go in all sorts of debt because they want to avoid the fate of having to work with like dysfunctional people that don't speak their language. Their communities get hollowed out and destroyed. On top of that, then you have the actual like economic issues. You have the housing crisis. I think this is probably like, for me, one of my big pain points. I make for a 25-year-old that has no obligations, I make good money. I make above the median income of the United States, and I have to live in a house with 5 other people. I have to rent a room for 5 other people. And my dad,
can I ask,
he was my age.
I kind of heard 2 things. Are you in Texas or are you on the West Coast?
I'm in the West Coast now. I'm originally from Texas.
Okay. Sorry, if you still have more to share, share it. I'm taking notes.
I was just going to kind of like compare. Whenever I talk to people much older than me, so not you older, but like actually like in their 60s, right? When they were my age, like in the 80s, right before all this kind of really started to exponentially decline or change, I should say. The stories they describe are like, I worked, for example, like they'll have some boomer, it'll be the classic boomer story of like, I worked at a pizza shop and making 5 cents an hour and adjusted to like modern income, it's like, I don't know, $10 or something. And on $10 an hour, they were essentially living the same quality of life that I was, just with less screens than I making like $78,000 a year. It is such an astronomically depreciated standard of living, with the only exception being, well, I have an AC and computer screens. And I don't think ACs and computer screens have made up for the social decay, the balkanization, the political radicalization, and everything else that we've seen in this decline of our country. And I think all of these policies are a reaction and like a last breath attempt to reverse that.
Okay. So I'm going to some of this stuff feels anecdotal, but I also don't want to dismiss it because obviously statistics are just like, aggregated anecdotes, right? However, what I would say, my anecdote is different because in the tens, which was a long time ago now, but it really doesn't feel like that long ago to me. I came back from the military in 2010, and like I said, I live in Central Florida, and in Central Florida, the service economy is still like our bread and butter, right? We still have the entertainment industry, we still have the theme parks, we still have this, that, the other. And I actually met my wife and had a pretty rich social life, I would say, in the early 2010s as a result of working in the service industry. So what I would say is that we're kind of looking at, in my opinion, a generational snobbery of not wanting to work service industry with people that are different than you. And I would say that part of my positive experiences in the service industry were working with people who completely spoke a different fucking language. Like literally half of the back of the house are legal immigrants, but they're Spanish speakers and they speak Spanglish, right? And so what ends up happening is, you as a 19-year-old or 22-year-old kid, you're, smashing beers and talking shit and speaking Spanglish with the back of the house crew while you're also hitting on young women who hopefully eventually become your wife. So that experience was only, a decade ago. And I have to wonder how much of that experience was robbed through economic snobbery of people not wanting to work those kinds of jobs because it's beneath them. And then I also have to wonder about COVID, because realistically, the lockdowns, especially for people who are coming of age right now, they lost 2 years of a very formative part of their lives. And I wonder if they have some degree of like social trauma from it, where they kind of take all the social problems that we have and then blame it on that thing. Now, the demographic transformations I probably can't address because I have another different experience than you, but that's okay. And then what I was going to say is probably the two most important things that you said. The boomer cost of living stories. Okay. Boomers don't fucking get it. All right. They don't get it. They don't get it. They're not going to get it. They're going to die. And let's face it, half of their wealth is probably going to go to medical expenses rather than being passed on to their kids as inheritance. But if you look at the boomers are like a fluke of socioeconomic history. Okay. We want the lifestyle of the boomers. We want to be able to make a decent wage. We want to be able to pay our bills and put ourselves through college and all that kind of shit. But if you look at their parents' generation, that was the Great Depression and World War II generation. They didn't get good jobs until they survived World War II. And then if you look at the generation before that, they were fucking colonists, man. Your options were like working in a factory and losing your fingers to fucking pickling machinery and then getting fired because there was no such thing as disability, or it was roughing it out in the fucking backwoods of America, homesteading a rural property, and Native Americans could kill you, or it was the fucking Civil War. So when we look at, well, our standard of living has decreased compared to the boomers, I think the boomers are a fucking fluke. And then, by the way, AC and screens don't make up for economic and social decline. I would borderline like challenge you to come camping with me in Texas in the summer, and then we can just sit out there and we can decide how much of like a miracle the internet and air conditioning is. But I've been yapping for a while, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say that like AC and screens aren't nice. I don't think AC
not just
and
nice,
screens,
like borderline miraculous.
Yeah, dude, I spent most of my time, like most of my free time, out in the woods, either hiking, and when I was younger and not living where I live now.
Yeah, but you're in the West Coast now. The West Coast is nice for that shit.
No. Like hiking, in Texas they call it hiking, but for the most part, in hill country, it's just walking around. And when I was in college, it was very mountainous part of the country. But even then, in Texas, I spent most of my time with my dad hunting. This is like I've spent a lot of time without screens. Like this is again. I would give up. I would go back to 2008 iPhone, which frankly functioned better than the iPhones that we have now. These things are so much worse than they used to be. But I would go back to even 10 years ago or 12 years ago or 16, 18, 20 years ago. I would rather go back to that than the technological progression that we've had and have to cede so many parts of my country. I don't think dismissing it as economic snobbery to simply want to be able to communicate with your coworkers, because the people you're talking about speaking Spanglish now, they don't speak any English. It's just Spanish. There is a world that I think is hard to describe because none of us kind of want to believe it unless you're interacting with it. But what you're describing in the 2010s is so fundamentally different to what even we have now. So like when people that I know intimately work very well, work their service jobs, and all they do is essentially tell me about how they are fucking, they're the one English speaker, so they have to work some front of house job at whatever kitchen or restaurant or whatever, and the rest of the people speak Spanish. So they essentially are a one-man army, while all of these other people are like, there's too many hands in the back, and none of them can work in the front, and then they all discriminate against the one person that speaks the language of the land, and they harass that person and they call them awful names, and they just make they create a hostile work environment for some like 22 to like 18-year-old that just shouldn't be dealing with this, because and while they're dealing with a hostile work environment, they have to be the front of the house. I've heard countless, and this is obviously an anecdote, whatever, but I think sitting there going, well, it's just, they're just bourgeois. They're snobs. They're snobs to not want to like work with a bunch of people that they can't have a conversation with at all. This is such a weird framing of it, and frankly, it's also such a low. It's a low vision framing. When I think of like what I want the people of my country to experience, I don't want the youth of my nation to experience labor that they have to endure with people that hate them, that harass them, and then can't speak the language to even communicate basic aspects of their work. This is a terrible vision for the country. And this is why, I'm going to say right now, this is why we hate you. This is why young people, this is why the young Republican guys, this is why all of them, they're not groypers, they're just radicalized, because they sit there and go, yeah, I think it's unacceptable that our nation is like this. I think it's unacceptable when we allow this. And they go, and the response to that is, you're just being snobbish. You just don't, you need to experience it. You need to experience the Spanglish. And you're like, dude, I'm speaking with people that have zero attempt to integrate. They speak zero words.
Before Connor responds, I want to highlight this comment over here from Subri Keller. This be literally doing help, I'm being oppressed. So I want us to imagine for a second this scenario where somebody from Guatemala or the Middle East or whatever goes to, let's say, France in the 50s. And there's all these French people there that are in the kitchen, and this person can speak French, and they're trying to figure everything out. And then somebody writes, is this bee literally doing help, I'm being oppressed? This Middle Eastern guy that doesn't speak French and can't really do anything in this scenario. Because to me, it feels kind of the same. I don't know.
No, I accept the hatred and the resentment. I do. And the reason why is because I probably, my instinct is to say the same thing that the fucking, boomers told me, which is, like fucking skill issue, get good, right? Which is kind of fucked up, but I mean that it is kind of my instinct. And what I would say is, I am privileged to a certain degree. I was raised overseas for several years. I speak a second language as a result. Speaking that second language made learning Spanish that much easier. And so as a result, I'm not good at Spanish, but I understand enough to, bullshit with Spanish people, call them slurs, joke around with them when they call me a fucking pendejo. I can say, pinche tu madre or some shit back, like I can fuck with them. And so that kind of door was open to me. But I do understand that door's not open to everybody. I think that kind of goes back to on an individual level. Okay, let's say that you are on a systemic level. We probably agree on integration. I think that it is not incumbent upon Americans who speak English to learn Spanish in order to accommodate recent immigrants to the United States. I think it's incumbent upon Spanish speakers and Chinese speakers and Vietnamese speakers to learn the language of the land. I think it is, and I think that there should be an integrative public education effort to make sure that if that first generation doesn't learn the fucking language, their kids do 100%. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, so that's on a systemic level. On an individual level, what I would say, though, is that if you are stuck in the West Coast, Pacific Northwest, if you're stuck in California, if you're stuck in LA, if you're stuck in San Diego, and you're truly surrounded by these like ethno-religious enclaves that are completely alien to you, and you are working a decent job that pays a decent wage, but you have 5 roommates, you need to get the fuck out of there. Like I know that it's like a laissez-faire liberal perspective to say just move, but like this shit isn't true in Omaha, Nebraska. This shit isn't fucking true in Boise, Idaho. This shit isn't true in Orlando, Florida, or like even fucking Miami. Miami is probably shitloads of ethno-religious Spanish enclaves where they exclusively speak Spanish. Dude, whenever I get an Uber in fucking Miami, it's the Uber driver only speaks Spanish or only speaks Haitian, and they speak like rough English. But at the same time, the rest of the city is fine.
I just want to say this is such a I understand what you're saying, and I get this a lot from other kind of.
You can hate me for what I said.
For boomer cons, where they say, "Well, how would you go to Tupelo, Missouri, where a house is $50,000 and it has 1 room and a stove, and there's only one job, and it's at the Subway, right?
And a good internet connection."
I understand that. I think this is why, and I think we kind of want to. I'm trying to loop this back into why the youth are the way they are. This is why the youth categorically reject it, because it is such a low vision for your nation. I love my country. My family has been here since 1820. I want the best for my country. I do not think the best for my country is seeding some of the most beautiful, fruitful, successful states and areas and our cities and our homes. I don't think seeding these areas to random newcomers that just colonized it illegally, when we have every mandate electorally and the impetus to simply remove these people. I think the vision that you were proposing, which is like, well, just leave California because California sucks. It's like, no, how about we just get rid of the people that are ruining it? And this is where we are, because what you're proposing is just a loser's argument, and people are tired of losing. And that it is 100% a loser's argument to say go to Tupelo, Missouri and work Subway and use an internet connection and jerk off and play video games and be happy. That's a loser's argument. That is the rural boomer con, go live in a pod, own nothing, and be happy argument. It is the exact same thing. When what we're saying is get rid of the people destroying our homes.
Okay, so I think you misunderstand. Are you Northern European, non-Hispanic white?
Yeah.
Well, I want you to find a nice Northern European, non-Hispanic girl, and I want you to have kids.
She's great. She's so lovely. She actually follows my Twitter account.
Excellent. So no, I don't want you to die a disease of despair, doing drugs to cope with a bleak dystopian reality. And I also don't want you, like I've heard you use the word nation repeatedly. I don't want you, if you do not consider Hispanic people a part of your nation, a part of your people, that marry somebody who looks like you. I could give a fuck. But my point, though, which is, again, I'm trying to appeal to statistics a little bit, is that like the estimate for illegal aliens in this country is like 11, and I think I've heard estimates as high as like 25 million, right? And so we're talking about removing 3% of the population, and as a result, I think that if we take and by the way, I don't even think this is going to happen. I think Trump 2.0 is going to try to do the mass deportation operations, but and they might even build the wall and secure the border to a certain degree. But I still think that the socioeconomic benefits of Central American and South American immigration are going to be so overwhelming that we're probably returning to the status quo, even under a JD Vance presidency, even under a MAGA successor presidency. I think the technocrats are going to calculate how many Hispanics to let in the country, and it's going to be more than you want.
I don't.
And so, sorry, go ahead.
Keep going. Oh, okay.
Well,
I think I don't like, and everybody my age, we all hate this idea of, well, we can't do it because what happens after, and there has been a systemic paralysis of the American right for long before I was born, and no one I know, and I'm gonna brace you for the future that you're going to encounter, because I hate to say it, and people might catch on a little bit, but there's nothing that can really be done. The entirety of the Republican Party is going to be occupied by people like me. It's just happening. Some people are kind of catching on. I think the Young Republican League kind of exposed that this is happening. The Democrat Party has been as bad as these people, like as radicalized as like the youth movement of the Republicans are. That is the entirety of the Democrat Party. The Republican Party is starting to catch up. They will catch up, and they're not going to entertain any of this because no one wants to be paralytic anymore. People want to move. They want to break things. They want to move fast. They want to break things, and they want change. They want a stop to the immobility of this party. And you will never see this kind of, well, we can't try to deport people that shouldn't be here, broke our laws, are facilitating human sex and drug human sex drug trafficking. We can't do anything about it because, well, it might destroy our economy. And the people that are coming in, they will do it. And they will see what happens. And we'll say, you know what? Even if it does, we have a better vision. We have a better vision because right now, the vision of, well, we just can't do it, it doesn't sell to anybody, and it's a loser's vision, and we don't want to lose anymore. We're tired of it.
Well, okay. My problem with what you've just said, number one, like, I'm not saying don't do anything about it, but are you familiar with the idea of political corporatism?
Yeah.
Okay, so just for the audience members who might not know, imagine the state is the government, the nation is the people, right? And political corporatism is a part of fascism, but it's a part of fascism that I actually agree with, which is envision the nation state, instead of being like a series of warring factions constantly fighting for power, envision it as like a harmonized biological being. And so, basically, like, imagine that your kidneys work the way they're supposed to, your heart works the way that it's supposed to, your brain works the way that it's supposed to. And so you have things like your immune system and your skin and your bones, and you can analogize these things to like culture or the military or law enforcement or something like that. And what I find in your rhetoric, which I'm not saying you think of it this way, but I find like a attempt to stabilize something that defies stabilization. These are systems to be managed. They are not a state of being to be perpetually held. And so while you're saying the passion is with you, these people are infiltrating the Republican Party, they're getting into positions of power, they have the rhetoric that is going to most appeal to young voters. Young voters are sick of the paralyzed slowness of the Republic of the United States. I just don't think there's enough of you. And so what I mean by that is that 45% of the Republican Party are normies. 55% of them are MAGA, but even half of those people are fucking normies. A third of the country doesn't vote at all. And then a third of the country is diametrically opposed to your political project. So if you are representative of a passionate, I'm not going to say it's not passionate, but if you're representative of a passionate political project, I would say that you're probably representative of maybe 10% of the population. And so I think you might need to brace for your dreams to be diluted a little bit.
You say that, but the RNC had everyone and their grandma up there with signs that said mass deportations now. I mean, like, that is such a...
That's because most people are very, very, very stupid, though.
You go back 8 years, and you said the Republican Party is going to have signs that say mass deportations now, and you would think that this was like Democrat fear mongering, and this is where we are, right? You go back 8 years, you go back to 2016, the trans thing, and this is not just like when I talk about like what the future of the Republican Party looks like with these young Republican people. It's not just the future of the Republican Party. It's the future of American politics is only going to keep accelerating in these opposite extreme directions. You're only going to keep seeing Democrats double down on this, and they're voting for it. One thing that's very interesting that I noticed, I was so curious before we had this conversation, is I looked up, see if you tweeted about Jay Jones, right? The guy who had his text messages leaked about hoping that his Republican colleagues' babies would be murdered in their mother's arms. You didn't tweet once about that, but you're more outraged and talking about the young Republicans thing. This is what I mean, is that it's only going to keep going both ways. And
yeah, but sorry,
and you care more about young Republican kids and their group chats getting leaked. You've been chipping out about it on the timeline, but not once do you care about the fact that Democrats are about to elect a district attorney that said people only move on policy when they feel personal pain.
Yeah, no, I think Democrats are pieces of shit, man. I spend a substantive amount of my time criticizing the right, but I would say that I also am compulsively critical of the far left, like the socialists and the communists.
This isn't the far left, dude. This is who the Democrat Party elects.
But you
this
hold
is the
on.
entire party.
Hold on.
This is half the country.
Yeah, sure. So, well, it's not. It's a third of the country, but and I would say it's probably half of that third. So it's probably a sixth of the country. But I want to point this out to you because you seem very confident in your radicalization. You seem very confident that this is the path forward. So from my perspective, I didn't really want to talk to you about like geopolitical international bullshit because I know you probably don't care, but I want to bring this up. You like Stephen Miller, and to some degree, you probably, I don't know, maybe you don't trust JD Vance, but you like that he's executing Trump's agenda. From my perspective, this is one of the most technocratically incompetent and stupid and malicious governments that we've had in decades. And so as an example, what happened was Doge said that their original plan was to cut $2 trillion from the federal budget.
Yeah, because Elon's a liar. We can skip this part. Elon's a liar. I'm not an Elon show.
I need to get a little bit further down the track before we skip this part.
Okay.
So $150 billion was ultimately recommended to Congress, and then Congress ultimately only rescinded $10 billion. That $10 billion was exclusively foreign aid. It was like $3.5 billion to USAID, and it was $6.5 billion to PEPFAR. PEPFAR is a program that was bipartisan, that was passed in 2003 by George W. Bush, and it provides antiviral, like retroviral medication for HIV, largely in Africa. And so this program is credited with saving 25 million lives over the past like 2 decades. Like people want to bitch and cry about 500,000 people getting killed in the war on terror. Well, George Bush saved fucking 25 million people over the past like 2 decades. Okay.
Yeah, I don't care.
I understand you don't care, but I need to make a point. The reason why Democrats, when Charlie Kirk got shot in the fucking neck, they didn't give a fuck. Half of them said, you know, he didn't deserve to die, but fuck this guy, he was a piece of shit. The reason why this Democrat was probably not memeing, but he was fucking talking shit about like, oh, well, Republicans need to die and feel the pain before they know anything, is actually specifically because PEPFAR got cut. It's projected to kill 3 million people over the next 5 years. And I almost guarantee that your response to this is going to be, I don't give a fuck.
No. My response to this is, I think I'm trying so hard not to be too loaded here. But did you read the National Review article about Jay Jones? Because nowhere did Jay Jones say, and you can't do this thing where you get to speculate on the mental state that when Jay Jones says, I want the speaker of the Republican Party in Virginia House, I want his wife to hold her children dead in her arms. You cannot do this game where you say, well, actually, the reason why is because they're extrapolating the numbers from U.S. aid cuts. You don't get to do that because He's
Oh,
never
I'm
said
sure
this.
he cares about
Not only-
BLM. He
not
probably
only-
cares about
not only
George
do you
Floyd.
not
He
get to do
probably
that,
cares about all that
you
bullshit.
don't. First of all, you don't get to do that, but you also don't get to sit there and say that the reason why he has, to this day, every Democrat still standing behind him. Not a single one of them called for him to drop out. Not a single one of them denounced him. They just said, well, we don't agree with political violence. But they didn't denounce him. They didn't call him to drop out. Where the governor sat there for 2 minutes, silent on national TV, not saying a word, as she was called to retract her association with him, and she just sat there and didn't say a word. And you know what? He still has a massive, overwhelming Democrat majority. He's probably going to win that election because people will vote straight down the Democrat ticket. He still has massive support from the party. So you don't get to do this thing
This is
where you extrapolate that to their mental state. No, you don't. These people are radicalized.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
There's another thing I got to add in here. It's very important. Here's something that I've noticed watching the chat right now. There are some people in your chat, I'm not saying everybody, Connor, but you would think that with some of these, more conservative MAGA people that I have on the show and the kind of people that come on here and comment in the chat usually, you'd think, oh, I get some pretty extremist things being said. I gotta say, the people who I've seen, some of them in the chat here, they have said far more angry, violent, virulent things that I have ever experienced on Break the Rules. This is just like looking at the thing.
Are fucking liberals, so just fucking
leftists, not liberals, leftists.
No,
if we're talking about how
most of them are liberals, they're not socialists or communists. But anyways,
but wait, sorry, but this is an important point though, because when it comes to what Bumbadum is talking about here, I think his existential fear has to do with the fact that if people are politicized in the direction that some of the more extreme people within your chat are in, like if they're going to be in that mindset, people are saying, well, why is he hiding behind a mask or whatever? I think that's kind of the reason. That's the reason why the stakes are felt so highly.
A specific example, because generally speaking, my chat doesn't Fed post. But was there a Fed post that shocked you?
So okay, I mean, here's one over here. Super chat, by the way, $20. Moral imperative to call these people cockroach locusts living off the gardens built by people above and beyond them. You can take that shit to the bank. So there's
He's
one
a libertarian.
Okay, fine. He's a libertarian, but as far as
I'm not saying that to be a smartass. His hostility to what Bumbadum is saying, grassroots hostility, is probably because grassroots. Sorry if I put words into your mouth that you don't actually believe, but grassroots, I think, and I see this as well, sees the mutual radicalization. And so what's happening is the Democrats are saying, oh, well, no offense to anybody present. I don't know how you feel about it, but Trump's a fucking pedophile. Like he sex trafficked kids in the 80s, 90s, and thousands, and social conservatives don't give a shit. He's running a horrible deficit, and because of tax cuts, and none of the fiscal conservatives give a shit. He's not interested in preserving the republic, and the constitutional Republicans don't give a shit, and the Burkean conservatives don't give a shit. And so they're seeing people constantly sweeping for Trump. And Bumbadum said it tonight, by the way. Trump wins, right? Or Stephen Miller wins, and they're tired of the paralytic sweeping of the Republican Party. Therefore, who gives a fuck about principles, or who gives a fuck about the election, or who gives a fuck about the republic, as long as we're actually getting what we want?
You don't care about
they see that radicalization.
Though.
Hold on real quick. I'm almost done, I promise. I'm almost done, I promise. And so as a result, the left wing was already used to sweeping for progressives and socialists and communists and being like, oh, that was a few crazy people online. But now that their own base and representatives are hyper fucking radicalized, they don't want to slow down on their side, because they view that as energy that takes away from the fight to fight Trump, who they view, and I view, as an existential threat to the republic.
Yeah, I don't think, we hear this a lot from the kind of classical libertarian types, which is the whole, like, you cannot sacrifice principles. And I don't believe necessarily in sacrificing principles. I think that the people that are so hung up on these principles, which I think it's good. I think it's good to hold yourself to your own principles. I think that's a good thing. They do it so much that they simply just don't act. because there has been opportunity. There's been opportunity for the past 50 years for the constitutional Republicans or whatever to do something to stop the ball from rolling. There's been opportunity, and they don't. And it even worse, they just continue it rolling. And when you guys don't stop the ball, then someone has to stop the ball. And you'll sit there and think, well, the principles. Well, at the end of the day, faith without works is useless. You need to put the work in, and you're not putting the work in. What you're going, you're saying, you can't enforce our immigration laws. It's against our principles to do this. You can't do this or that, or you can't do executive orders. It's against our principles to do this. You can't, like, what?
No, I mean,
at this point, you're already seceding the nation to destruction.
Yeah. So this is just where we disagree on what's happening in the country. So for instance, like I said, I do want every single person who's inside the United States to be vetted by the federal government of the United States. But I still think that we can have a large Hispanic population that engages in the construction industry and engages in the agricultural industry to our benefit, and they can be immigrants. I also think that we can have a strong law enforcement, strong military, this, that, the other, or whatever. But I understand that effectively let's say that you're the extreme. Okay, let's say you're the extreme on immigration, and let's say that Biden is the opposite extreme, not because he says that he's pro-mass immigration, but because in action he allows mass immigration. Okay, let's say those are the two extremes. I understand that what you're saying is, by me being a centrist and constantly trying to negotiate, nothing ever fucking happens. And what happens when you vote for somebody who talks like me, you get tax cuts and nobody does shit about immigration.
True.
I agree with you. And this is part of the reason why electoralism, like voting, not only do I agree with like voting in lesser of two evils, I think voting is least effective human actions you can do in reference to like improving your life or improving your community or improving your state. I think that voting in elections, I think that the way that our current election system is set up is that effectively we're voting for parasites who say the right words in order to get power. And even if there's like an ideologically principled person who gets into politics, ultimately they will be hollowed out by the system by the time that they reach any level of actual political power. And so for me, what I try to emphasize to my audience and what I try to focus on is like act local as much as possible. Focus on yourself. Like improve yourself, lift weights, eat food, get 8 hours of sleep, drink water, take care of yourself, find your wife, find your kids, pay your taxes, pay your bills. And like, if you have free time, try to improve your community. Because these systems...
These memes are fun until your community becomes Dearborn, Michigan. You know, and this is what really got me away from that. Is because I saw my neighborhood transform. Like I saw my neighborhood transform in 10 years.
Okay, but you're painting Dearborn or even these like Mexicanized neighborhoods in like Texas as these like shithole hellscapes filled with like violence and crime and rape. And
I didn't say anything about violent crime. I'm saying that they are unpleasant and fundamentally un-American to live in. These are places where they don't speak the language.
See, I don't agree with that because
no values. These are places that are so ontologically separate from the historical precedent of the nation. And you might go and say, well, there used to be Irish communities and there's Italian communities, and it's like these are so not the same. These people, at the very least, spoke the same language, and it's everywhere. This balkanization is everywhere. We've already went over this. You've already agreed to that. And even furthermore, the framing is so frustrating here because you're sitting there saying Biden's the opposite extreme. Biden was the return to normalcy moderate candidate, by the way. Biden is not I would say extreme. Biden was ran as the return to normalcy moderate, and he let in 20 million people that we know of. That we know of, right?
Yeah.
This is such weird framing. I'll sit there and say, fine, sure, you can call me an extremist, whatever, even though most of my positions are just the administration's positions at this point. And maybe the administration's extreme. But Biden ran, but the administration ran on being pretty hardline and extreme, and they won, which is pretty impressive. But they ran on being moderate, and and we saw what moderates winning, the moderate party winning, and you're sitting there and calling, well, actually they were the extremists. No, you don't get to do this feigning. You don't get to do this feigning, and it frustrates me so much because you'll say, well, I beat on the left, but I'm really concerned with the far right, and it's like, dude, we have a soon-to-be, very likely, all polling indicates that Jay Jones is going to win his race. He's going to become the district attorney of Virginia. I'm about to move to Virginia, within the next few years. And he's going to be the district attorney of Virginia. And this is a dude that believes that people that disagree with him need to have their children die in their arms so then they can become less right-wing. This is what he's saying in phone calls and in text messages. And you're sitting there going, well, actually the moderates are like the extremists, but like we have such weird framing here and you have such an odd sense of focus. Like you see the people on this side of the party that are winning and are such existential threats to the American project fundamentally. I at least believe in freedom of speech. I at least believe in that. I believe that, frankly, conversations, debate, for the most part, can work. This guy doesn't even believe that, and he's about to win his mandate. He's about to get an electoral mandate that is pro-crime and believes that inflicting pain on people he disagrees with is the only way to get them to agree with him.
Okay.
And you're sitting there tone policing young Republicans.
Yeah, well, you gave me a lot there, so let me try to unpack 2 or 3 things. So So saying that Biden had an extreme immigration policy is not me saying that Biden ran as an extremist. Okay, I want you to understand this. What I'm trying to say is that one of your criticisms, which I agree with, is that our leaders are saying one thing and then they're allowing a status quo that you believe, actually I believe and you believe is hurting the country. Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, let's say that Connor becomes dictator instead of everybody else. Not only do we have a secure border that we secure with $21 billion in order to build a physical fence, but we also have increased funding for Customs and Border Patrol and ICE along the border. So effectively it becomes like almost impassable. Like people aren't even interested in trying because that's how secure the border is. And then like, if let's say that we had those 100 people that we talked about that were applying for asylum and 96% of them are economic migrants or whatever, I would effectively not admit them into the country first in order to determine their asylum thing. They can wait at the fucking border in a holding cell, or they can wait in Mexico, right? While we're evaluating their asylum application. So I'm like, maybe I'm not as hawkish as you, but I'm not exactly an immigrant dove. Okay. So let's put that aside though. The existential threat, what I think that we're disagreeing on is that I think that there is like a 90% chance that if you and I went to Dearborn together, we don't need to hold hands. We don't need to be fucking best friends. But if we walk down like a normie street in Dearborn, or and by the way, it could be like Muslim majority. It could be like 99.9% fucking Muslim. Or let's say that we walk down like a working class neighborhood in Texas. Not only could we find people who speak English, we could probably find people that were fucking nice. We could probably find banger ass food, and we could probably find people to have a really interesting conversation with. So believing that like we have ceded the nation to these hostile colonists and that we're never going to get America back because these areas have been infiltrated by these swarthy fucking aliens, I just don't think is true. Like I just don't think that
none of those are the qualities of like an immigration standard. Like they're not sitting there, coming in through customs, and you sit there and say, "Well, can you make a really tasty dinner?" They don't even ask if they can speak English, by the way. So I doubt that question. But we're going to see is we're going to go down there.
Yeah, we don't agree on this. I think finding an English speaker in Dearborn or finding an English speaker in a majority Hispanic town is going to be easier than
they are literally, like this guy just pointed out, they are literally blaring Muslim prayers. Right, you're going to see that.
There was a lady who was complaining about that to the government, and they did fuck all.
Yeah, they literally kicked her out and said, "If you're not a Muslim, then you need to leave." This is on video at the city council.
And by the way, if a Christian community, like let's say a majority Christian community, was knocking fucking church bells at hours for service, I wouldn't give a fuck about that either. So anyways.
I don't know if that's necessarily the same.
Church bells don't sound for service; they sound for the hour mark.
Okay,
so that's so different. These comparisons are so bizarre. You're like bending over backwards to defend the colonization of your own country. This is so bizarre to me. I don't
as an
understand
existential threat. You're acting like Dearborn, Michigan is now cut off from you. You can't go there. Not only can you not go there, you can't find anybody who speaks your language or anybody who's
certainly not wearing certainly not in a bikini. Certainly not wearing a bikini in the Dearborn. I doubt that they'd appreciate that.
Dearborn, Michigan.
Bikini. But anyways,
Dearborn, Michigan will be representative of nowhere else in this country or this country's history for the past 250 years.
I want to get to the Democrat that's threatening violence. Okay, so here's the thing that I kind of want you guys to realize, and I'm really not trying to Fed post. Okay, I'm just telling you the way that I see it. When I became a Marine in 2006, not only do I come from a military family, blah 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 blah. Anyways, I took an oath, and that oath was to the Republic of the United States and the Constitution of the United States. And I think that the things that are in our Constitution, like freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, right to self-defense, up to and including against the government, limited government in the 4th, 5th, and 8th Amendments, prohibitions against cruelty, the 14th Amendment, like equal justice before the law. Not only do I think these are good, not only do I think these are good for the United States, I think these are like universal goods. Like I think that the world would be better if it was more in line with the Republican ideals of our republic. So when you say, well, I only give a fuck about winning and I don't care about principles. And if we have to break a few old rules and if we have to break, these gay laws written in the Constitution, then it is what it is because I want to win. Sorry, go ahead.
That's not what I said. I said that adherence to certain principles, and by the way, we've been very vague with these principles because I don't really think we actually kind of principally even disagree. I think most of what I believe in is all frankly constitutionally viable. I think probably every policy, not only constitutionally viable, likely protected, and Supreme Court has been ruling in favor of. Everything that I believe in, I don't think I necessarily, if I went down a list, nothing I necessarily believe in really violates the Constitution. I really can't think of much. But I'm not saying that you should cede principles. I'm saying that it's literally like the Catholic meme, faith without works is nothing. Like it is meaningless. Sure. It is meaningless to sit there and say that I care so much about freedom of speech and freedom of religion that I'm going to import a bunch of foreigners that don't believe in freedom of speech and then want to colonize my entire country. Like this is
okay. Yeah, I don't think we agree on descriptive reality, but I don't think I think I have works to match my faith, but we don't have to argue that necessarily to make the points that we need to make.
Yeah, but you're saying that your guys, you would admit your guys have no works, that they'll say things and they come in and all they do is pass lower taxes. You've admitted this multiple times. These people that you support,
the moderate Republicans
don't do anything. They are faith
moderate Republicans.
Yes, faith with no works. Yeah. And you've agreed with that. Yeah.
Well, Bumbadum, unfortunately, I think it's deeper than that. Okay. If you'll indulge me a quick anecdote. So I went to Washington, D.C. because I was recruited by a Democratic org during the 2024 election and I worked with them and I've got a lot of criticism for that. But through the connections that I met with the Democratic org, I was invited to a political summit action, whatever. And it was like liberalism in the 21st century. And it was a bunch of like DC bigwig, multimillionaire, technocratic, not gubernatorial, but like government types who are either like representatives, former representatives, state level representatives, or they're technocrat think tank people who consult with the Democratic Party, right? And so you would think that in the era of Trump, where the Democratic Party is getting its shit kicked in the era of political radicalization, where the average person seems to be increasingly polarized, you think the focus would be on, holy shit, nobody gives a fuck about our highfalutin ideas. What is radicalizing people? How do we appeal to them? And how do we get them onto our team? But I'll tell you, that's not who I met in DC. Who I met in DC was effectively like, have you ever seen the South Park episode of San Francisco where people are farting into wine glasses and then smelling their own farts?
Yeah.
That's what it was. That's what it was. It was smart people and millionaires who were so impressed with their own fucking success that they did not care that the country outside of their, you know, nice little enclaves is falling apart. So when you say moderate Republicans don't do dick, I think our political class largely doesn't do dick in reference to addressing like the existential and spiritual issues of our country.
It's not just elected people are doing things so much that you hate them, that you have come out and said that they're evil, that they're terrible people because they are so effective at just doing what they said that they would do when they were running. So I don't, you know, maybe it might be the moderate political class that you like, but not the moderate political class that I like. The moderate political class that I like, they're actually doing things, or at least
right. But what I view them as doing has, you know, in my opinion, it's killed tens of thousands of innocent Ukrainians. It's projected to kill millions of Africans. It's violated the due process rights of immigrants to
the United States. First of all, let's just.
If you'll indulge me, I'm just gonna tell you why I think they're bad.
It's not the responsibility of the United States to prevent.
Don't worry, I'll move domestic. Let's
just focus on domestic. This idea that it's the United States' sole responsibility of the planet to prevent global AIDS. This is insane. What an insane.
Okay. Yeah. We just don't. Yeah, you're not a neoconservative.
That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So we should have a different conversation about neoconservatism a different night. But anyways, the focusing domestically. So focusing domestically, my frustration with Trump's social conservative moves, I suppose, whatever social conservatives would be happy with Trump, is that I think that in order to achieve these things, we're overlooking Donald Trump's sins, which I think are so grievous that it should cause a moral conflict in any social conservative who votes for him. Then, more existentially, when it came to the fake elector scheme and January 6, 2021, in my opinion, Donald Trump tried to do something that genuinely threatened the social fabric of the United States of America. And then finally, with 2028, with Steve Bannon and Donald Trump both joking, quote unquote, but I think Steve Bannon is serious, that Donald Trump realistically should use this convoluted process in order to remain president in 2028. I don't view that as like a funny, cute meme of politically effective people. I view that as people who are pretty much fascistic, openly telegraphing that they think they can get away with this kind of shit. And it's not funny to me. It's not cute to me. Like, people kill and die for this shit.
Wait, could I step in here?
They kill right-wingers that say things that I say, like how they kill Charlie Kirk and how they try and kill Donald Trump. They are violent, awful, evil people. And hold on. But the only thing that I won't accept here, I will accept 2028. But like, maybe there's some concerns about 2028. But like, I think it's such like a non-factor in regards of what's happening now. Like, if your objections are like, why is this administration evil? Oh, it's because he's joking about 2028, right? And in reality, 90% it comes out to is I don't want to deport farmers.
You are offhandedly dismissing, because that's not even including USAID cuts. Like, you're offhandedly dismissing for like an estimated 14,200,000 people who are dead as a result of the Trump administration, but it doesn't even mentally process to you because they're not American citizens.
No. It is not the responsibility of America to be the global hospital. This is insane. This is such an insane, put it on any other nation. You don't. You say, no, it's America's responsibility to prevent global disease. It is not our responsibility to prevent global disease.
Wait, could I counter this real quick?
Caretakers.
I want to counter what Bumbadum is saying, because if America was in the position where now it became, you could say, well, it shouldn't have been in the first place, but it was responsible for the lives of these people now, And just undoing it like that, there is a lot of responsibility that America would have in that sense. If America never did anything at all, if it was just, completely isolated Star Trek style.
Upon people to not contract AIDS. I think it's incumbent upon themselves to make educated decisions, like not doing dry sex, which is a common practice and where this is happening. I think it is incumbent upon them to not do these things that cause the fissures, that cause the epidemic. This idea that it's actually on us to continuously, infinity, for the rest of time, endlessly pump Africa with drugs is insane. It's such an unbelievable expectation, especially for a nation that has as many issues as we do at home. And frankly, this is if you believe any of these numbers.
Probably I'll give you the too long didn't read summary. The too long didn't read summary is that we were isolationist in the early 20th century. Okay. The only hemisphere in which we operated was the Americas. And as a result of not caring what happened in Europe in World War I and World War II, we got sucked into wars that cost hundreds of thousands, if not a million American lives. And so as a result, what we decided, now we didn't decide this as an electorate. We did not decide this as a people. The government decided this without our input. Okay. I will admit this. Okay. However, what the government and the technocrats decided after World War II is that preventing World War III would be less costly than letting World War III happen and then engaging in World War III. And so as a result, we became the world policeman. We fought the Cold War. We controlled the energy industry coming out of the Middle East and North Africa. And while you can say that these adventurous international intrigues have led to America taking on more than is rightfully theirs, this has also led to incredible human flourishing and wealth. The United States, through like unilateral, multilateral, bilateral alliance, we are in some degree of control of $70 trillion of annual economic activity of the world's $100 trillion level of economic activity. The only part of the globe that is not a part of the American commercial empire is like China, Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. It's seriously like half a dozen countries who are not a part of the American
and by the way, China and Russia are going into Africa right now, so they're the ones who are colonizing various parts of Africa.
Yeah, but they're actually like colonizing it. They're developing it. They're not just like endlessly pumping drugs and foods.
This does bring up an interesting question. Wait, hold on. This does bring up an interesting question of if America was to take care of people in this way, would it make more sense for it to do it in this spreading Hellenism a la Alexander the Great type way, where we would actually encourage much better levels of human flourishing in these parts of the world, where it wouldn't just be, well, America's now this babysitter for, people who are doing their own thing.
Hold on, Bumbadum. I need to make this point. This is a partially selfish action. Okay, we are providing billions of dollars. Like I think it's like $3 or $4 billion worth of international aid, and PEPFAR itself is $6.5 billion. That's $10 billion. That's 0.16% of the federal budget. But in return, not only do we get that, but we get like military partners, people who buy our equipment, people who buy from our military industrial complex, people who consume American agricultural goods, people who consume American medical goods, people who consume our technological services and all that kind of stuff. And then not only do they consume our goods and services, but we in turn consume their goods and services. And then that enriches and stabilizes these areas of the world. And so for you, I think that your moral calculus is like, well, they're not Americans, so fuck them. But for me, my calculus is like, this is a win-win-win-win-win-win-win. Like
it's Europe, so much winning. It's so much winning that the median first-time home buyer is 38. And if you can't sit there and say,
can do both.
No, clearly you can't, because you have had the mandate, you have had the power, the mandate, and the people. You have had the representation. You have had your people and the people that believe in what you believe in charge for 50 years, and they have not done both. So clearly,
they don't believe what I believe. I tell you what, clearly, they don't believe it earnestly.
Clearly, whatever you're doing and what you believe in is not leading to outcomes that are conducive for a society in the United States that would even continue to be able to fund and control this $70 trillion of wealth. Because when the median first-time home buyer is 38 and people can't do the bare minimum that it takes to continue a society, which is find a partner, have kids, have those kids have kids, have those kids have kids have kids, and continue a process of continuance of this nation, when you can't even sustain that while you're doing this, well, we control 70 trillion, then that we control 70 trillion suddenly stops. So you don't get to sit there and go, and all these lofty, successful things about, well, actually, we make so much money by giving them all this medication. Yeah, the median first-time home buyer is 38 in the United States. That's a problem.
Okay. So give me a little bit of rope with this. The people, this is another frustration where the right wing has been subsumed by MAGA, which in my opinion has like very little to do with philosophical republicanism or any variant of conservatism that I'm aware of. Because the people who addressed your concerns about home ownership were the Democrats in the 90s. Yes, hold on. I need you to give me some rope here. Okay. In the 90s, they came out with the whatever fucking bill that was signed by Bill Clinton or whatever that effectively federally backed home loans to people who were first-time home buyers. And as a result, this spurred one of the greatest housing booms in like fucking decades. And what happened was effectively the construction companies just went fucking insane. They just built suburbia as far as the eye could see. And so this bubble went on for a decade where construction workers were making hand over fist, bankers were making money hand over fist, loan managers were making money hand over fist, people who were like managing, like they were business people who were on the outside managing the wealth of the construction workers and everybody who was a part of this bubble, they were all fucking profiting. This was effectively the economic boom of the late 90s and mid thousands. But what ended up happening as a result of this is that there were so many perverse incentives built into the incentivization structure of the 2008 housing crisis that they were giving bad loans to people who had no business owning homes. And they were giving multiple loans to hold on. I just want to explain this to the audience, even if you're aware of everything I'm saying. So what ended up happening was through perverse incentive and through government incentive, they created one of the biggest housing booms ever, but then they committed so much fraud and they bet so much money on the fraud that they were committing that they created the worst economic boom and burst since the Great Depression. The only economic burst worse than the 2008 housing recession was COVID. That's the only thing. And so as a result, you coming in and saying, oh, well, we can't provide for Africans 0.16% of the fucking budget to make sure they don't die of AIDS. We need to take care of fucking housing for Americans first. Number one, we could do both. Number two, we did do both. And the reason why we haven't done it again is because we almost imploded the entire American economy.
No, the actual reason why there's no housing right now, by the way, is because there's
I'm sorry, what?
Since the 70s.
Actual reason?
The actual reason why we have such a massive housing shortage at the moment is because for the last 70 years, we have had the most unbelievable regulatory policies in this country. NIMBYs have destroyed any ability to develop. And on top of all of that, we've imported, I don't believe, 20 million for a second.
Liberal?
I'm not an abundance liberal because those people suck. These people prioritize like fucking like
be
all
a
these
racist
social
abundance liberal. Say Hispanics, get out of my country, but let's deregulate.
I like Bukele and Lee Kuan Yew. They're super cool guys. They fixed their country. They actually did really good things for their countries. Lee Kuan Yew and Bukele are probably the best world leaders that the world has seen probably the last like 50 years. Probably longer than that.
Okay, my only concern with that, and by the way, like I do respect Bukele in certain regards. So for instance, like dropping the homicide rate, which I think was like around 100 to like 2 per 100,000. That's obviously impressive. And then same thing with like the economic innovations. One of the things that he tweeted out recently that I really liked was he was like, animal welfare for cats and dogs in El Salvador has been horrible for so long. We're going to be partnering with international organizations in order to get the stray dogs and cats off of the street, but we're not going to do it through like draconian mass slaughter of stray animals. We're actually going to do it in a humanitarian way. That like, listen, you might have tortured and sodomized a few people in Sukkot, but you also did a lot of other crazy shit. But I think, or a lot of good shit, I suppose. But my fear with Bukele, similar to Tito with the former Yugoslavia, is that you can have a benevolent dictator or a good king. But what ends up happening is not only do you have the abuses like the lack of due process, torture, and all that kind of stuff, but what happens when the good king dies, if the king does not set up a good system with which to succeed his power, then it all fucking falls apart. And that's what I particularly fear. You're saying that a majority of what you want to do is constitutional. That's great. I think that there are shitloads of people similar to you politically who do not give a fuck about the Constitution or the peaceful transfer of power or the republic perpetuating itself.
Yeah, I think maybe there's a point to be made there. I want to just swing back before all of this. Yeah, the housing market, the explanation of 2008 and all of that. Yes, I'm familiar with all of that. You don't get any sort of housing initiative. Like, you don't get your nice lofty international programs for USAID when you don't address these issues at home. And that was more of the broader point, is that clearly, we can't do both. Because for whatever reason, when these issues at home have gotten so bad that there's no tolerance for any spending abroad, you can maybe make the point, like, I might be able to agree on some sort of, like, global American empire point on why we should have our fingers in everybody's pies if it actually benefited Americans. But at the end of the day, when Americans don't feel these benefits, and you see such insane statistics that reflect a broken economy that is especially bad for anybody that's not a boomer, right? And I think generally speaking, literally every problem in this country is sourced of the fact that everything is being legislated to the benefit of old people. But beyond that, right, you don't get these things. You don't get any of your nice lofty policies that you want. You don't get any of these nice do-good goals and this imperialism and this soft empire. You don't get any of that if you don't have good things happening here. Right now, these are so bad and so, like, statistically awful that this is why these programs are being lost. I'm sure we could still, of course, fund the USAID with 0.1% of the federal budget. Who cares? Like, you could, but no one's going to support it. People aren't going to support it anymore when no one can buy a fucking house. And this is your problem. And by the way, FHA loans and subprime mortgages and all of this, that's not the solution. The solution right now, by the way, I guess, like, right now there's a housing surplus. I don't know how much you follow the housing market, but essentially boomers are holding onto their houses. They need to be essentially taxed out of their homes. But you need to essentially kind of sort of collapse the housing market at this point by just getting rid of a fuckload of people. This is the only way forward now. You won't be able to subsidize loans through this, because we had FHA subsidized loans that have been abused since COVID, with insane numbers of people just not paying their mortgages, taking 3% down payments, and just actually not paying their mortgages and abusing the shit out of the COVID extensions and the COVID expansions of the FHA program. You're not going to subsidize your way out of this problem. You have to actually deport your way out of it.
I disagree. I think you could probably subsidize your way out of it. However, I will throw you a olive branch that I want the liberals in the audience and liberals in my audience to hear. Effectively, I'm with my audience in that I think that the disease that you are diagnosing, I think is not exaggerated, but I don't think you understand it the same way that I do, or we disagree on the nature of it. And then I also would argue that the cure, in my opinion, your cure, is worse than disease. And but what I would like to point out to the liberals in the audience, though, is that effectively, like, within a representative democracy, if you have sufficient people like Bumbadum, where they feel like they're not getting a fair shake, where they feel like they're working their dicks off and they can't get ahead, where they feel like all of the benefits and all of the fruits of the American empire are not being directed towards them, it's being directed towards everybody but them, then you get a figure like Donald Trump. And so if you don't address these things, then this is how we have a second Trump presidency. So that's my olive branch, as much as I can offer.
That's a nice olive branch.
I think that's a nice way of putting it. I think it's about right. Yeah.
So when it comes to addressing some of these things, I want to go back a little bit to the question of responsibility of our institutions. So forget the politicians right now, because we talked about the evil and the bad intentions that a lot of them have. If we're just focusing on the ground, like a friend of mine who works... Sure, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the Republicans as well, like the stories that I've been hearing is that a lot of them, they just like drinking and partying and, living life to the fullest.
They probably start as an idealist, and then they get up to DC,
absolutely.
They start rubbing elbows with rich and powerful people. They get used to it, and then they realize that nobody's getting anything done, and they're like, "Well, fuck it, I'll push for my shit as much as I can."
Okay, so if we're looking at if we're looking at the existential problems here, keeping in mind that a lot of these politicians, except for maybe the ones that Bumbadum may keep in mind, who are like true believers and are willing to do absolutely disgusting things in order to achieve their ends. So if we put those guys aside for a second and just take a look at, well, what is life going to be like with the way things are? To the best of our abilities to figure this out, right? A friend of mine who's in construction, his kids are in Long Island right now, they're in school, and their friends there, from Guatemala, they don't speak a lick of English. Now, I would say that, wait a minute, what's going on with these teachers? Why aren't these teachers enforcing, like learning the English language over here? So there's some weakness that at least he's seeing in how schooling is being done, in this regular run-of-the-mill school. So if we're talking about the responsibility of just like the average responsible administrators and teachers and all these people that make society run, right? If we're talking about their lack of skill at getting everybody on a certain kind of program that you would be for, Connor, and you would be for Bumbadum, if we're seeing that they don't really have the capacity to do that, then we could anticipate there being decline from that. And then if we bring in the whole Hall of Mirrors question, where how are people living in Brazil? How are people living in Mexico? There are certain little things that everybody does on a regular basis that is reinforced by the things that everybody else does, right? So people mirror whatever they see. So if we're talking about people here in the United States, that yes, they have American culture, but how much are all of these responsibility having administrators and teachers and people that they're supposed to look up to, how much work are they putting in to the next generation, save for just like some dumb American culture bullshit that they're watching on the internet or TikTok? You know what I mean? Like that kind of level of responsibility. If it's not there, what is America going to look like?
Well, okay, hold on. So there's plenty of work to be done. All right. And I like to think, as much as I have a pretty small stream, that if I get large enough, I will be doing some of the work of trying to white pill people and get them active in their communities. So I'm not trying to say that there isn't work to be done. However, my sense of alarm is not as high as Bumbadum's, because I'm Irish. I'm ethno-religiously Irish. And 200 years ago, if you asked the world what they thought about Irish people, they were mud-dwelling, bog-dwelling, alcoholic, Catholic savages with 12 kids, barely capable of speaking the English language, obsessed with fighting, obsessed with sex, obsessed with degeneracy. The only thing they were good for was dying as firefighters or cops or cannon fodder during the Civil War. Like if you go back and if you watch Gangs of New York, which is a fantastic film,
Roman potpourri.
The Anglos of the time did not view the Irish immigrants as true Americans. They weren't true Americans. They weren't part of the Anglo project. That was Buffalo Bill, or not Buffalo Bills. That was Bill the Butcher's problem.
Butcher. Yeah.
Yeah, Bill the Butcher's problem. Bill the Butcher's problem was that he found one noble Irishman, Leonardo DiCaprio's dad, and he killed him in battle. But the rest of the Irish were a bunch of fucking degenerate fucking savages. And so, coming from a line of dysgenic, degenerate, alcoholic, too many kid having Catholic savages, it's hard for me to like buy into the doomerism, because all of the fear that is being expressed about Mexicans, all of the fear that's being expressed about Puerto Ricans or Cubans or whatever, it's the same fear that was expressed about my people.
But this brings us back to what I was talking about before in regards to what kind of pressure the WASPs were putting on the Irish and the Italians and the Jews and everybody else.
I agree with forced integration.
Yeah, but 100%. It doesn't happen. Like, this is the thing, right? Like you can say, well, I agree with this thing. I want this thing to happen that I've had representation of for the past 50 years, and none of it ever happens. Like this
I
is it's
don't I
such a
don't agree with you.
useless
Dude,
thing. It's such a
if I
useless
live in a
thing to say.
community,
It's such a
listen,
useless
it
thing
might
to
not
say.
be
I want
happening in
these people.
California. It might not be happening in New York, but it's happening in Florida.
Okay, the thing about Florida, which is like, I understand why you keep going back to it. Florida has been historically, I mean, you can go back all the way back to like the 2010s, right? 2016, I remember reading about this when I was in high school. Florida has historically always been this wild card Hispanic culture state because you had so many Cubans fleeing communism, and you had so many of these, like much more either you had essentially Hispanics coming to Florida where there was a specific selection bias where they were very, very inclined to vote Republican. And this has been the case for a long time. People have kind of known about this. And you might even be able to make the argument, well, Donald Trump won in record Republican numbers for Hispanics last election. You can make that argument too. But at the end of the day, right, they don't get assimilated. And we know they don't get assimilated. We know, and it's not just Hispanics. It's all of them. It's the H-1Bs, it's the Indians, it's the Muslims. It's literally every group that comes in. They find their little pocket. They find where they can go, where they can sit there and speak the language of their homeland, and they go and they leech money out of the American economy and send it overseas and create an ever-expanding, balkanized community. And you've seen it everywhere. So when you sit there and go, well, I believe that they should be Americanized and forced integration, cool. It never happens. So it's a faith without works. What you're saying is useless. What you're saying doesn't happen anywhere.
Well, we can give examples of it happening
agree.
as far as like, let's take a look at Texas, right? There's Mexican Americans that live in Texas that have their own businesses. Like, I'm not talking about people who are just, like landscaping and doing that kind of stuff. I'm talking about people who are responsible Americans who have their business. Now, wouldn't you say that that would be an example of people that were able to successfully integrate?
If you're making the case of like the Chicanos that have been there for generations, right? That were like a mad mixture of the old, Spanish Empire, Mexico, whatever. I think you maybe make a case for that, but I think we're also talking about a significantly different class of people that hopped the border. The 20 million that came over in the last 4 years, the upwards of 50 million that are in the country at the moment. It's likely much higher than that. They've been saying there's been 20 million illegal immigrants in the United States since I was in high school 10 years ago. So like I don't believe the 20 million number. It's likely much higher. These people are integrating. And on top of that, whatever new class of post-Hart seller that are coming into various other parts of the country, you see this all across the West Coast, you see this in San Francisco. You see this in Los Angeles. You see this in New York. You see the balkanization. You see the languages change on the signs. You see the fact that none of the people speak the language of the land. You see this in Canada as well. You see this everywhere. You can literally see this new age, especially from the global east or from the global south. There is an integration, and we can sit there and play this game of like, well, I believe that we should do forced integration, and it may have taken my ancestors 150 years to integrate into becoming American because they were dirty Irish, right? We can play this meme, but this is such useless paralytic action. This is what I mean. This is inaction. This is role playing. This is doing nothing. And you sit there and present these ideas to people that sit there saying, this is actually making our lives worse. We don't like it. And and they're breaking the law. They are breaking the law. They are defrauding our immigration systems. They are defrauding us, and they are border hopping. They're committing crimes, and we just want them out. And you sit there and hand wring and say, well, the economic losses will be too big. They'll integrate eventually. No, they won't. And we know this. We know this. They're not. They're just balkanizing.
Okay, so if we real quick, if we take a step back and if we look at, well, who are the influences or what are the influences of the second generation and third generation kids of the migrants that have already come into America, right? So they're getting TV, they're getting TikTok, they're getting internet, and they're also getting their teachers. I'm not
ones
that
vote even more liberal. The ones that vote for the literal, identify. We have the Asian caucus and the Black caucus and the AAIP and the Hispanic.
Wait.
Caucus,
Before we get to, I would again say leftist.
Directly in contrast with any sort of integration. You like the kids are
no. Fair enough. But if we're not talking about the kids right now, if we're talking about, let's say, the second and third generation kids going all the way back to, I guess, let's say the 90s, right? So the kids who emigrated from Mexico in the 90s, around the time that me and Connor were growing up, right? So the kind of environment that they got when it came to learning the language and, talking with everybody else and integrating into a kind of American culture, are we saying that the people who are in charge of the future of these kids, whether it's the students or whichever role models they happen to have in their neighborhood, is this enough of an influence in order to get them to the level that Bumbadum would prefer?
If I may, I don't agree that we're doing nothing. I think the status quo actually takes an incredible amount of energy and effort in order to maintain. I think that immigration, as aggressive as it is today, I think ICE and DHS and all those people have been working their dicks off for as long as I've been alive. I think that law enforcement typically deals with the pretty bad characters who actually do all the fucked up shit that we're talking about. I think that public education teachers and private educators and tutors are working their dicks off in order to educate people, in order to get them to integrate. And then also, I see people in my chat kind of like freaking out and being like, Bumbadum doesn't go outside. I'm not going to be like a dick and say that Bumbadum doesn't have experiences, or his peers don't have negative experiences with demographic shifts within neighborhoods or non-integration. I've had bad experiences with non-integration. A Puerto Rican guy, and I knew he was Puerto Rican because he had a Puerto Rican flag in the back of his Honda Civic. I'm driving down a major thoroughfare in America, and I see this motherfucker just throw trash out into the middle of the goddamn road. And I wanted to fucking jump out of my car and strangle him and scream at him and say, hey, if you want to fucking throw trash onto the side of the road and live in a third world shithole, go do that somewhere else, dickhead. Like, obviously that's like, there's the same, the same impulse. Is like you came from a shithole and you came here and you're acting
But
like
what you're saying, Connor, just to be clear, what you're saying is that there's enough teachers and there's enough influences in the positive direction.
Enough, but I'm not, okay.
No, but that's a very important point.
There's enough to survive. I think the Republic's going to survive. I think we're going to survive whatever doomerism that Bumbadum is worried about.
No, but this is the most important question.
We're not.
No, but this is. I'm not even talking about the ideal, but this is the most important question, right? Because if we're talking about the survival of the Republic, what exactly it takes, forget, you could speak English or you like the same football teams, like that these people, like, forget all that shit. If we're purely talking about having enough people who are educated in the right way from a young age in order to be a lot more low time preference, right? That would be a noble goal. I don't think either of us would disagree that we would prefer there to be more people who are in positions of responsibility, who are low time preference, who are not just thinking in the moment. If that is the goal, I don't know if we have enough evidence right now, one way or the other, to say, well, what's going on behind the scenes in the schools and the neighborhoods and the influences as far as taking the majority of second, third generation migrant kids into that proper level, right? Like, how can we know this?
I mean, I would appeal to American history. We had waves of Italian immigration. We had waves of German immigration. We had waves of Vietnamese immigration. We had waves of Somali immigration. We had waves of every kind of person that's been on the fucking planet. We've had some kind of wave. And even the Chinese enclaves that Bumbadum is talking about. I've been there. I've been to Chinatown in New York. I've been to Chinatown in San Francisco. And I'll tell you, it's fucking weird walking into a store, having everybody speak fucking Chinese, and then you try to talk to them in English, and they're like, oh? Like, that's fucking weird. Okay.
Also,
what an incredible sell to the youth. You are selling.
Hold on though. Commit crimes.
De-radicalization so well. You are selling de-radicalization to young Republicans so well. You are so going to convince them to not believe what they want and to become a principled classical liberal conservative. What a good sell. That
I mean,
we
dude,
should just tolerate
that
our stores are weird, and we should tolerate all this.
Wait, hold on though. With China, this is a very important point. I had a Chinese ex-girlfriend, and we were going to the store to buy scissors. She did not have to pay taxes on those scissors because the guy running the store was Chinese. So they have their own system going on there. But even more importantly, though, than the Chinese ex-girlfriend, is that in Chinatown, we've had busts of these so-called police officers who were working for the CCP, who were kidnapping Chinese dissidents back to the home country. We've had multiple instances of Chinese spies who have climbed the ladder, in the military, and they spoke English wonderfully, and they were highly respected and all of that. And this brings to mind this very important question of what is the teleology? What is the inner life of the person who is going to be here? Because it's not just about even high time preference or low time preference. That's a very important factor. The other factor is how much is there going to be this commitment to whatever we would consider to be the American ideal. And the Chinese spies, they don't have that commitment 100%. If they're willing to sell out their new host country, to the overlords back in the
Lev,
CCP.
Hold on, Lev. So I agree with you that there are like hostile Chinese criminal and governmental elements embedded into the Chinese population. I profited from one of those criminal elements when I went and bought a fake handbag for the wife. Now, so it's just true. Like it's just true that triads operate in Chinatown. It's just true that the CCP has been caught spying in the U.S. multiple times. But you know what's fucking funny is there's this guy, and if you YouTube it, it's like the Chinese guy with a Texan accent, and it's this guy who fucking immigrated over from China. He came over. He fell in love with Western culture. He fell in love with Texas. He immigrated to Texas. He adopted the language. He started carrying guns on his hip. He owns a ranch. He's like he's trying to role play as a 19th century American cowboy, and he speaks English with a Texan accent. It's fucking hysterical. But anyways, so that's an anecdote. But I want to share another one. I had a Chinese student who started dating one of my roommates and hung out with me. And while his English sucked, and I think he did move to China eventually, he was so fucking blown away by like the nightlife, alcohol, girls, guns, just the amount of crazy shit that he could do as a college student in the United States. It effectively, in my opinion, he's more likely to betray China for the United States through cultural exposure than he was likely to steal from the United States because he loved the United States so much. So yeah, like, is that an anecdote? Of course it is. But
it isn't even about the Chinese though. Okay,
I want to interrupt real quick. The point of this conversation is that Counterpoints has this alien. He's been alienated from the Republican Party that he likes. And the point that I'm trying to hammer here is that these people are the staffers. They are the organs of these bodies. And a lot of people don't like that they're the organs right now, but no one else is signing up to be the arms and the legs of the Republican Party. So this is the party's future. And and so far, all of these people have known is the total abject failure of everything that has come before Trump. And so then it is incumbent, if you want to get these people to not be like that, you have to present them a better vision of the world than what they see at the moment. This is the key. The key is to present a better vision of the world. And a better vision is not, well, you should just tolerate the fact that your stores are going to be filled with people that you cannot talk to. And you are taking essentially that degradation of the social space of the country and applying that to essentially everything. And saying, well, if your life is that bad, move to Tupelo, Missouri and get an internet connection, right? Move to the middle of nowhere, and secede your entire family's lineage, and let's say some city that their family has been in for generations, right? This is such a terrible losing message, and you will convince nobody, and you will accomplish nothing. I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for you to not be alienated anymore. In one way or another, I'm rooting for you not to be alienated for another, but you need to figure out a way to message to people a winning, positive vision for the future that allows you to have your pet projects with USAID, and where people don't get so angry that they nuke it off the face of the earth because they can't afford a home. But you aren't presenting that image What you're saying is, well, you need to tolerate your coworkers harassing you in foreign languages while you have to pick up all their
I don't think I
slack
said
because
that.
they can't do this.
Wait,
You need to tolerate that. You need
to be fair,
tolerate your schools being
to be fair
weird.
to
You need
Connor,
tolerate weird signs.
I
You need
said
to
I said call
tolerate
them
your-
racial slurs back.
wait. To be fair to Connor, from what I understand, you were talking about the vision is that the people who are right now not speaking English, eventually their kids and their kids are going to be fully integrated and they are going to speak English. If that's
Well,
the
I
future
would-
that you're, but if it's
Well,
not
that's
the future
that's the
that
future
you're
that I think
seeing,
is going to happen. But if you were going to ask me policy-wise, do I think that immigrants from the United States should not even borderline, should be forced to take like civics and language classes, like 100%?
Yeah, but we're not talking
and then-
Izzat. If we're talking actual predictions here, if you're saying that you are pretty sure that they're going to integrate, but see, this is the big difference between you and Bumbadum. I can't say it properly. Sorry. This is the big difference. Yes, this is the big difference.
No,
because
okay,
you're saying, no, just to be clear, you're saying that we have these problems right now, this bottleneck of these new migrants coming in where, yeah, unfortunately, Bumbadum and his friends are going to have certain problems right now speaking with people, interacting with people who have a completely different worldview, let alone, speaking a different language. But you are pretty damn sure that this is going to change, that there is going to be integration. What I want is to understand why it is that you think that. What are the pieces of evidence you could present to change Bumbadum's mind about that specific thing? Because a lot of it comes down to that.
I don't think that I'm gonna change his mind specifically.
I
would actually
don't want you to necessarily. Sorry.
Well, I want to address this though, just because maybe I won't reach Bumbadum, but maybe I'll reach somebody in Bumbadum's audience or Twitter following.
Sure.
So what I would say is, I think that for every anecdote that Bumbadum has, I have a contrary and contradictory anecdote. And just as an example, specifically with Mexicans, when I was in the service, when I was in the Marine Corps, I would say 30% of my unit was Hispanic. They were all second or third generation. They spoke Spanish, but they were also American patriots, and they fucking loved this country, and they were willing to die for it. They were willing to fight for it. And I still think about these guys. I still think they're some of my best friends on the fucking planet. And they were socially and linguistically integrated. However, I don't think that I win with Bumbadum by saying, and I expect him to resent me, and I expect people his age to resent me when I say, tough titties, suck it up, move to Boise if you hate Hispanics that much, get a new job, find a white wife, get her pregnant, have kids you can't afford. I don't expect him to like my answer. I expect him to say, you don't know how hard it is, go fuck yourself. That's what I expect. However, when you say like, where can we, in my opinion, this is more important, where can we bridge the gaps? Wealth inequality, I don't want to solve wealth inequality. I'm a capitalist, but I do think that dignified wages and a dignified lifestyle for the middle class and upper working class of America is something, if we don't fix that, we're going to continue to experience the kind of political instability that we're experiencing right now that could potentially lead to violence and civil war. When we're talking about rapid demographic change, Hart-Celler, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's the Immigration Act, Hart-Celler and the role of the United States as world policeman was never voted on by the American people. And I view MAGA and Bumbadum as a logical reaction to never being consulted on these things. I think these things are going to happen with or without him buying into it. But I understand the rage and frustration that this was never an issue of consent. Bumbadum and Bumbadum's parents never said, let's make 24% of America Hispanic. They never voted on that shit. That just happened. Then existential technological shifts, I think we're all going to be dealing with that. I think the internet is a existential technological shift, and we are part of the solution by having really complex conversations via the internet. We're part of the solution. And then the dissolution of the social fabric. These are like the 4 issues that I think are radicalizing Americans. I would encourage Bumbadum or somebody from Bumbadum's audience, let's go to these fucking ethno-religious shitty fucking enclaves and let's have conversations with these non-American, non-integrative, radicalized Muslim, Mexican rapist pieces of shit and let's see if they're as bad as Bumbadum says they are. And I don't think they are. I think a lot of people would actually find the opposite of what Bumbadum said. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Interesting. Before Bumbadum responds, I wouldn't really say that it's that convincing, not just for Bumbadum, but for people who are very curious about what exactly are the influences in a lot of these young people's lives who end up becoming the second, third generation. Because what you said about the military, that's a really great example. I know this guy. His dad was European. His mom was a Mexican prostitute. And he was in a really bad part of town, hanging out with, gang members and things like that. Going into the military completely changed him, you could say, like within, like how he approached life. It gave him like a reason to do the kind of things that he's doing today. It was a very powerful motivating force. But it almost seems like those success stories you're talking about, maybe if this country was run like a military, then people who are within these economic, social zones would have a better way out. What I want to know is whether... Yeah. Well, what I want to know is beyond that, if there are other things that could be introduced in this conversation as far as the second and third generation kids, what exactly do they have? Because if it's the people that are around them in their neighborhood, I don't know if that's enough, and I don't think that they're going to be doing that kind of job. If it's social media, I don't think that's enough by a mile. If it's the teachers, I don't have a lot of faith in them, at least from the things that I've seen so far and the anecdotal experiences that my friends have had with their kids in school. So I'm not seeing these particular factors that would lend themselves towards what we want to all see.
No, Bumbadum has a valid criticism of my worldview that I think frustrates me. And the valid criticism is you talk about forced integration. Another idea that I would have is I think every single fucking American citizen, anybody who's capable of voting, should have to pass the citizenship test of the United States of America. Also, if I was dictator for a day, in order to vote, you would also have to complete 2 years of public service. So, but Bumbadum's criticism of that is, yeah, Connor, you and moderate and normie Democrats virtue signal, or not Democrats, but normie, I guess right-wing Democrats, but right-wing Democrats and moderate Republicans, never Trump Republicans, you virtue signal about this integrated process. You virtue signal about forcing immigrants to become a part of the American social fabric, but ultimately you don't do dick on policy. So why the fuck should we believe you about anything? And I think that's a perfectly valid question and criticism. Is everybody who's like me in representative politics, they just pass tax cuts. That's the only thing they do.
Yeah, I'll have to leave it off with this because we're running into my bedtime now, and I have a big boy job that I have to get up at 6 in the morning for. So, but I want to leave it off with this. I am not I will admit, yeah, sure. Let's say I'm a radical, whatever. Maybe I would be counted more of a radical like 5 years ago, and maybe the Overton window has shifted in my favor. Whatever. I don't like radicalism. I don't like to see people get shot on campus because they disagree with what one party says, and where their whole entire bit is let's have a conversation, and he gets shot for it. I don't like the increasing acts of political violence. There's all sorts of weird situations, like the one with was it Minnesota or whatever, with the weird guy that broke into the house and killed, I think it was like the speaker. That's bad. All these things are bad. I don't like seeing any of this. I don't think things get better. And the only way you kind of get better is either A, everyone just goes to one side, or B, you find a way to present people a winning vision that pulls them away from these policies that you may think are evil or destructive. You have to present a better vision. And what frustrates me so much about the classical Republican, classical liberal, James Lindsay types, these kind of people, is none of you guys present a good vision. You just present moaning about how edgy and evil they are in group chats, and it's always to one side. It's never proportionate to the substantiated and profound evil of the other party. Never trying to de-radicalize them, it seems. And And then the vision that gets presented, that you would say, hey, if we see we have these alarms going off that all of the young men in this country are insane, and they're saying terrible things in the group chats, and they actually mean it. It's not ironic. They mean it. We should try and find a way to pull these people back from the brink. And to pull these people back from the brink, and this is more of a prescriptive thing for you, because I'd like to be nice, is you have to present a better vision, not a vision of what you think the country is now. Because whenever someone tries to tell me that things are good, all it feels like is gaslighting. Because I can go to imright.com and figure out a million studies and a million anecdotes as to why I'm right. So you can't win on, well, actually, the life you live is not as bad as you think it is. Because at the end of the day, I can go and I can find a million studies that substantiate every single grievance I have. What you have to win on is a better vision. You have to win on a much better vision. And you aren't. And this is why people do not agree. This is why you guys have lost the youth, because you are not presenting a good vision. And
hold on, before Connor,
the vision has sucked.
Before Connor responds, very important that this goes out right now, because I think that what is in the center, the dead center of this conversation, which has not really been expressed properly, is the idea that maybe in order to make certain things that Connor would find to be much more appealing, you know, as opposed to doing certain things that Connor would find to be really bad that Bumbadum wants to do, it may involve making decisions that both Counterpoints and maybe a lot of his audience would also find to be very despicable. But there may be certain very despicable things that need to be done, you know, doing the needful, in order to prevent much worse things that Counterpoints you're seeing down the line when it comes to dictatorship, when it comes to all that stuff. There may be certain things that are a little bit gross, that if they are done, it's going to prevent far worse things from happening. Well, and the concern that Bumbadum has, once again, is that if the Gordian knot remains uncut, a lot of these problems that he's talking about are just going to get worse. But if cutting the Gordian knot means doing things that are a little bit gross, how far can we go in that direction before it all collapses and we have the dictatorship and all that bad stuff?
We didn't get to it tonight, and maybe we can get to it another night. But I am sleepy as well. I am with Bumbadum, so I think we should probably be doing closings. But the what I would say is we didn't get into economics, and I think that economics is probably going to be one of the most uncomfortable topics. The reason why is because I think that it's actually a meme that I saw the other day. It's Anakin Skywalker. You know, Padme Amidala walks up to Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he's like, you know, there's 6 kids, but there's only 3 chairs. What do we do? And Obi-Wan Kenobi says, get 3 more chairs. And Anakin Skywalker says, kill 3 kids. And so that's kind of where we could talk about food subsidization. We could talk about access to housing. We could talk about, you know, mixed, or like I honestly think that in order to solve some of these problems, both environmental, social, economic, we almost need to fundamentally reconceptualize how we build cities. And I almost hear nobody talking about it. And so as a result of hearing no one talk about it, it just feels like it's not going to happen. But I have like a billion ideas. They're just not very popular within the current zeitgeist.
Yeah, I mean, one I would definitely say has to do with making sure that certain religions, which are also political systems, do not take root in this country, and just doing something about that. Anything about that would be something that a lot of people would find completely disgusting and not right. So that's just like one idea that I'm throwing out there of certain things that can be done. You know what I mean? Like, and it's unfortunate that we have to.
Solutions a different night.
Okay, let's do solutions. Let's do this again. Before we go, we got to go into the super chats over here for Mr. Counterpoints. Let's see what we got. We have a lot of stuff. I'm just trying to figure out. Here we go. Okay, so one over here from the spectacular grassroots hegemon, $20. I think that's actually the case, but as a middle-aged conservative, I don't want these people calling them Republicans or conservatives. I want that to be owned by people like Connor, Ryan, North, myself. I want those. There we go. Now we have another one. Wow, this guy's loaded. $100.
I told you he's a
Nothing
libertarian,
about.
man.
There we go. Nothing about it almost makes the cockroach comments seem fine by the sheer amount of money that he's giving to Connor over here. So I appreciate that. That shows a good, loyal fan. That's very important. So he says, nothing about being angry makes you grassroots. These are not roots in the garden. They are locusts on the garden, built by people better than them. So we got some new members over here for you. I don't know how this works here. We got Beef Supreme. There we go. We got Kay with the red hair. We have Beef Supreme gifted 5 Counterpoints Politics memberships. There we go. Check that out. And then we have, once again, Grassroots Hegemon, $20. Probably because these mother effers aren't Republican, conservative, or anything else. They're just mad. That's not a core to any usable politics. Over here we got a Harmonic Fox, $2. This is all I can afford. We got over here Grassroots Hegemon once again. I speak Spanish. It doesn't hurt us in the way it does having 30% of your neighbors speak Zisa in 3 weeks. I don't know what Zisa is. This guy will do less for his country than I do. Oh, come on. Than I do in my sleep tonight. That's kind of mean. I don't know. I mean, it's not as mean as the cockroach thing. That's okay. Okay, this one I wanted to personally address. Does Lev live in the U.S.? I know he's Ukrainian. On my dad's side, I am. He seems to be a good dude, but he surrounds himself with right-wingers and incentivized propaganda that is destroying my country. First of all, have you been paying any attention to the streams that I do on this fucking show? The fact that I have right-wingers and MAGA people that I intentionally bring on with the most pro-Ukraine of pro-Ukraine people in order to try and reach out to them and convince them that it actually makes a lot of sense to support Ukraine, to stop Russia and China,
Christian is American, so he's saying they're destroying America, not destroying Ukraine.
Huh.
Just to be clear.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough. I was a little bit confused about that. But for all the people in the chat who do care about Ukraine, check out the streams that I have on Ukraine. I bring on people who don't really think that America should be doing anything, and we manage to find a lot of common ground when it comes to that. Here, some more grassroots. It's a moral imperative to call these people cockroaches, locusts, living off the gardens built by people above and beyond them. You could take that shit to the bank. Well, as far as the above and beyond thing, we all want people who are above and beyond whatever standard we consider to be the low standard, right? That's something we could all agree on. Over here, Grassroots Hegemon. You skin-suited my party and used it as a weapon to attack me. There is nothing conservative about this guy. They live on my money. They hide behind values I actually have. Over here we have from 1988 Cuba. Speaking of Cubans, remember Fidel Castro, a son of a Spaniard father from northern Spain and a Cuban mother of Canarian descent, overthrew a mixed-race person, Batista. Yeah, I mean, there we go. I'm not really a big expert on what exactly is going on with the racial categories of Cuban people. Hippo, okay. I don't know, and this is not a super chat, so why did I start this? I'm interested. I don't know that I would grant this person a political opponent, nothing political about this. It's too sociopathic for something like mature human conversation. Yeah, so this is going to be a big challenge going forward as far as whatever prescriptions happen to be, sounding very negative and very offensive. People on the other side, you could say like on the liberal side, I'm not going to use the word left, people on the liberal side would consider the things that Bumbadum is talking about to be an existential threat for their life. And again, the jury is still out. I want to know to the best of my abilities whether the road we're on right now is going to get us to where we need to go. But anyway, over here, this one also, fuck his middle-class Groyper coward, but fuck Lev for cry bullying about YouTube comments, comparing us to violent, cringe leftists like Hassan and company. Okay, you're a little bit, just to be fair, you're a little bit better than Hassan and company, 100%. There is no doubt about that. So, Connor, I congratulate you on having an audience. They are better, listen, but they're a little bit angry. They're a little bit angry.
They're pissed off. Like seriously, how I would say 40% of my audience,
yes,
because I debated in the Twitch and YouTube political scene, are disaffected right-wingers, never Trump Republicans, libertarians, conservatarians, all that kind of stuff. 40% of them. 60% of them, because I debated in Twitch, which is like a super lefty space, they're mostly like pissed off liberals.
Yes.
That's 60% of my audience.
But it's still, the weird thing for me is that I'm Jewish on my mom's side, and to a lot of the right-wingers, that makes me fully Jewish. But I've noticed that the comments that I end up getting in the chat, a lot of the times, like, a lot of the Jewish stuff, it hardly ever comes up, and they don't seem to be as pissed off. And I don't know what's going on there, you know what I mean? Like, I would expect the right-wingers to be equally pissed off against the Jewish guy, but a lot of it... one of the good ones. Well, see, not really, though, because I don't want there to be a dictatorship. I don't want there to be, this transfer of power from Marcus Aurelius to fucking Commodus. Even though Commodus was very popular among the military class, but that's a story for another day. What I do want, though, is to find the middle ground between both of you guys, because I agree with aspects of what you're talking about, but the road is still extremely unclear as far as what is going to happen with these second and third generation kids. And that's what I really want to find out.
I know Bumbadum needs to get to bed, so I'm not trying to talk for too long, but I would say that the fate of the Republican Party and the fate of our national discourse is between my and his position. Because what's going to happen is either Bumbadum and his political project are going to dominate Republicans to the point that Never Trump Republicans and moderate Republicans and neocons like me abandon ship and they become right-wing Democrats, at which point the Democratic Party probably moves right-wing. Or they, like what I'm trying to do, stay in the Republican Party and try to fight the good fight, I guess. And Bumbadum and I obviously don't agree on a substantive amount of things, but maybe I can at least make him see what the fuck I'm talking about, even if he still thinks I'm an asshole.
Well, I don't think you're an asshole. I just am tired of people losing. This is the core of it. I just don't, and I talked to this is my key disagreement I had with Groypers when it came to the Gavin Newsom meme, where their whole take is if we just keep letting Democrats win, then things will get so awful that they'll just get the mega bad guy. Okay. And right. I'm like, no, because when Biden won in 2020, whatever the circumstances of that are debated, who cares? But from 2020 to 2024, I like that. I think it's a fun meme. But from 2020 to 2024, we're so terrible in so many ways. Like probably the worst years of my life were from 2020 to 2024. And many of these things were directly attributable. Like I could directly attribute insane, absolutely insane stories, racial discrimination on my campus, from the administration of the campus. Like there were like non-white rooms. They called them cultural spaces. All the way to the fact that like I could not get a job related to my original degree because I was not a minority, and the state that I was in had overt quotas at the time. The absolute insanity that went on during those years, I would do probably anything to prevent that from ever happening again. And even if it meant like electing maybe like no, I just would do anything. I would rather do anything than see anything like 2020 to 2024 ever again in my lifetime. And the vision you guys present is such a loser's vision that people will go for Biden again. And I just will never do it. I'll never do it. I never want to see that again in my lifetime. These people are so evil. They are so terrible. They put a guy in jail over a meme. They waited 4 years, and then 1 week after Biden was inaugurated, they put Douglas Mackey in fucking jail for a meme. This is how evil these people are. I never want these people to come back. And I will do everything to advocate for a vision that would get people to never vote for these people. That's my thing. Like, I don't think you're an asshole. I just think you're a loser, and I never want to lose. Because these people, the people we lose to are so consistently evil from top to bottom. There's no goodness. You can pluck a random DA in Virginia, and you'll see him saying that he wants to kill children. Like this is how evil these people are. And you can go to any district. You can find Gavin Newsom or some random judge here, or the DA in Dallas that let go an illegal immigrant murderer. Like you can just find all of these people. They're so evil. I never want to give these people an opportunity ever again.
Okay,
And
here's
that's what I mean.
quick
I don't think you're an asshole. I think
pitch
you're a loser.
before counterpoints and you do the promotions. Real quick pitch, because I know you guys are sleepy and gotta go. The pitch is this: if we want to solve certain issues when it comes to these activist judges, let's say, and let's say there are certain legal things in place that prevent anything at all being done to these activist judges who release the criminals and do all of these really, really bad things, I would be for some kind of a system where we have the rule of law, which prevents from people, getting arbitrarily, sent to jail because, they offended some son of an oligarch like, they do in Russia. I want to prevent that shit from ever happening, but at the same time, there should be certain things done lawfully and legally, however we end up defining that law. Maybe we have to make new laws in order to do things about Islam, in order to do things about these activist judges, but keep everything in the law. That's the difference between me and Bumbadum and the difference between me and Connor. You see what I mean? Like, keep the law, but we have to do certain, possibly a little bit extreme things in order to prevent even worse things from happening. Whoever the disaffected liberals are in the audience that understands what I'm talking about here, then I hope that you could subscribe to breaktherules.tv. You can watch various episodes that I have here, not just about politics. A lot of this has to do with philosophy, history, religion. I bring on really interesting people like Gnostic Informant, who uncovers the various secrets of all of these ancient religions, along with the Nietzschean Uberboyo, the Iranian philosopher Jason Reza Jorjani, and a lot of pro-Ukraine people as well. I bring on pro-Ukraine people who debate more of the MAGA isolationist base. And by the way, it seems to be working, because right now, Trump seems to be on board with sending those missiles Ukraine's way and sharing intel. So things are looking quite rosy for that particular connection. But anyway, that's the pitch that I will make. And also patreon.com/breaktherules. If you want to support the show, and if you guys happen to live in New York City, if you become a $20 plus patron, you are going to get to be in the audience here in the studio in Manhattan, watching the shows as they occur, the BTR NYC shows, and then we're going to have a rooftop party. So I invite you people to go there as well, patreon.com/breaktherules. So that's my pitch. And now, Counterpoints, you have the floor.
Are we doing outros?
We are doing outros.
Okay. So guys, my name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, politics, and philosophy nerd, Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran. I would argue a real Republican, but that, is a contested topic these days, considering I think that Bumbadum is substantively more representative of what the Republican Party is right now. I'm going to fight the good fight. I'm probably going to fail, but I'm willing to die on some hills. And then also, I appreciate Lev for putting this conversation together. I appreciate Bumbadum. Even though we didn't agree on a substantive amount of issues, I appreciate you engaging with me. And I'll shill for you. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. I parasocially love you, and thank you for hanging out tonight.
Thank you guys so much. And Bumbadum, where could we find you?
I am a lowly, ingenious schizo poster Twitter anon. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, or formerly known as Twitter X. It's at Bumbadum. I know it's hard to pronounce. We've all been tripping over it, except for me, because I'm a genius. Bumbadum 14. Yeah, and all I do is post and work my actual real job. And somehow these posts, somehow people like them. I don't know why. It's just I think I say it's schizo journal posting. But yeah, I mean, I think it was a good conversation. I didn't mean to. I hope didn't come off. Sometimes it could be a little bit rude. I try not to be rude. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. And when I say, I want to say real quick. Considering your political identity, I'm sorry for interrupting. Considering your political identity, this was probably the most sane conversation that I've had with somebody of your political persuasion.
Yeah, there we go. That's the power of Break the Rules, everybody. That's how it works.
I said earlier that I try to be pragmatic here, but like, yeah, when I mean loser, I don't mean this is a moral condemnation. Loser is not a moral. It's a delineation of effectiveness, and I just want to say that I know.
No,
loser agree.
Weirdly enough, I don't take it personally
Cool.
because I agree with you that the people who have virtue signaled about my values, I don't think they've executed my values in my lifetime. And I think that's what sucks when you kind of realize it as an adult. You're like, they talk about the family, they talk about personal responsibility, they talk about fiscal responsibility, they talk about being a good patriot, they talk about this, they talk about that. And then realistically, you believe these things. You're willing to fight for these things. You're willing to die for these things. But the people who propagandize you into believing these things, ultimately, you said multiple times, faith without works is dead. They are good preachers of the faith. They do not have many good works, and some of their works are antithetical to the faith. And I think that's what sucks about growing up and realizing how hollow our politics are.
I do want to say one final thing about Bumbadum's profile here on X. He calls himself an anti-fat nationalist. Now, when it comes to some of the people who have been found in those group chats and the photographs, in fact, they're on the thumbnail as well.
You should be attacking them more than me.
I did. My first reaction was that one, terrible OPSEC. Now, granted, I didn't realize at the time that it was a massive extortion racket from some insane asshole. I don't want to say anything that would get this lovely channel removed from the internet. But yeah, the extortion of how these messages were acquired is evil. But yeah, these guys, they look like, you guys ever watch that Spider-Man movie? It was the first thing I said was like the most average, the most proportionate looking young Republican, and it's fucking Kingpin from the Spider-Man animated movie, where he has a head that's like the tiniest thing, and he looks like this block. They all look like that. I was amazed. I was like, dude, how do you? It's not that you're just all fat, but you are all this oddly weird proportion.
No, dude, I'm with you. They have weirdly.
They look like Kingpin. They look like they're about to fight Spider-Man.
So they're bulky, but if they lifted, they would be brick shit houses. Like, you would not be able to knock them over.
O-lines, dude, they would be huge. But instead, we got weird kingpins that unfortunately had a mix of bad OPSEC and got extorted. One guy it was a very, very weird situation the more you look into it. But yeah, I'm not a fan. All right, they all need to hit the weight. All right, I have anti-fat posting is a big part of what I do. I think they should be put in a cage with a treadmill and maybe give them some Zins and just make them not eat. They need to earn every calorie they burn. You know what I'm saying?
Zins have a lot of bad chemicals in them.
On this one. We can break bread on this one. So any fat authoritarian right winger needs to fucking lose weight.
Dude, they need to lose weight. Like they all need to
put in
lose
a fucking cage. And fucking
the best thing that happened with JD Vance is he lost weight. Like, JD Vance has his issues, but he's not fat anymore. Good for him.
Are you pro Ozempic, by the way? Are you pro? No. Yeah, but how would you even know? Are you gonna have to do like tests to make sure that they did it the real way?
Is because they just don't eat, so they lose all their muscle mass as well. Because what happens when your body starts consuming for energy, it starts with fat. Then if you don't use your muscles enough, then it starts going through your muscles first, and then it'll go through your fat again. So every person that's on Ozempic is like super, super skinny. There's Ozempic body's a thing.
Yeah. By the way, this comment, Lev from Fell Runner, Lev is going to take our chats and leak them. I am not a narc. I appreciate you guys watching the show. And even though some may be a little bit feistier than I'm used to, it's all right. I know you guys are coming from a good place. All I could say is that I want everything to be lawful and legal, but maybe a little bit more than has been done right now. Let's try to use the things in our toolkit in order to solve these problems in such a way that maybe certain people who aren't used to it will find it to be a little bit shocking, but it'll be worth it in the long run to prevent the kind of dictatorship that a lot of people on the right may be leaning themselves forward. Okay? Is that not a centrist enough position for you people? Then I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do anymore.
It's for me. It's good enough for me.
There we go. Thank you so much, Connor. I appreciate it. I don't know, Bumbadum, if that's good enough for you, but this is where I stand right now. And we're finishing off the show. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, both on Connor's, because I know that this is being simulcast, both on Connor's, but then go to breaktherules.tv. Do it right now. Smash the subscribe button, smash the like button, click the bell. Very important for the growth. And I will see you guys later. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Parasocial love, guys. See ya.
See ya. Bye-bye.